Asasa Radio 99.5, broadcasting from the nation's capital at 2 o'clock. We'll commence our very special webinar broadcast, but you're hearing the first part of it, which is a song by Stoneboy. And we'll be getting into other bits and pieces that you'll be hearing, speeches and other things as well. But this is a second Borderless webinar on AU Day. The African Prosperity Network is hosting the second Make Africa Borderless Now webinar. And they're asking, why should an African need a visa to visit another African country? Why do people from other continents have more access to African countries than Africans themselves? Why are we losing $5 billion in banking fees paid outside Africa? These and other questions will be asked and answered perhaps today on this webinar, 2 hours, from 2 o'clock exactly. So you can join us and join a very, very exclusive and well put together panel of experts from different backgrounds to discuss these issues, led of course by Prince Moses from the African Prosperity Network. He's the Director of Strategy, and also Gabi Asari-Ochodako, Founder and Executive Chairman, APN. Some of the other guests, Ziad Hamwi, Co-Founder and President, Borderless Alliance. Her Excellency Ambassador Amachum Amwa, African Union, and also Amin Idris Adum, Director Infrastructure, Industrialization, Trade and Economy, AUDA, NEPAD. Wode Maya will also be joining. He's a vlogger, YouTuber, and several others. Nana Kwame Bediako, CEO, Kwale's Group, and several others, and you as well. Let's join the conversation. Go now immediately to www.africaprosperitynetwork.com/second Borderless webinar, or visit any of the Africa Prosperity Network social media pages to register now. You can also join us on Facebook and all of our social medias on Asase Radio to find out what's going on, to donate or add your signature to support the movement. www.makeafricaborderlessnow.com. The moment for Borderless Africa is now. Hashtag Make Africa Borderless Now. Webinar coming up at exactly 2 o'clock.
About you, in spite of you, Africa will unite. Let this word sink in your head. Divide and rule is dead. All Africa, Ethiopia, Mali, Cameroon, Kenya, Tunisia, Haiti, Namibia, now.
And representatives of the government of the African independent states, fellow Africans, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasant duty on behalf of the government and people of Ghana to welcome you, our distinguished guests, to our country. We are deeply grateful and highly honored to have among us such eminent statesmen of free Africa. We hope that your stay in our midst will be happy and enjoyable. And we pray that divine providence will bless and guide our direction. Africa is far from people. It is Africans who are poor, not Africa. And they are poor because of the uncounted profit that has been made out of the exploitation of their labor.
Well then, a big fraud is assistance. We are tired of being the victims. After your faraway walls, tear down the Berlin walls. Make us up, don't bother with them borders. Africa is free forever. Trade free, move free. My sister, my brother. We don't need no visa from north to the south. Take the train from the east to the west. Direct flight from Accra to Kingston. 5G internet, no matter where we live. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa. Do you believe? I believe in Africa. Say I believe. I believe in Africa. Do you believe it? Watch out there. All Africa. Ghana. Nigeria. Congo. Tanzania. Egypt. Guyana. South Africa. Oh, no dollarization. True unification. We are the biggest single market. Say no more to the colonial racket. They don't care. They never will be fair. Let's come together and grab our share. Join the fast track to prosperity. We want food and energy security till eternity. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa. Do you believe? I believe in Africa. Say I believe. Oh, Mama Africa. In Africa. Africa. Yeah. All Africa. Hey, Senegal. Côte d'Ivoire. Hey, Angola. Rwanda. Morocco. Barbados. Zimbabwe now. Well, this is Africa's time. Let every cloud shine. It's not about you, in spite of you. Africa will unite. Let this word sink in your head. Divide and rule is dead. All Africa, Ethiopia, Mali, Cameroon, Kenya, Tunisia, Haiti, Namibia, now. Oh, let's all come together now. Oh, Mama Africa, all Africa,
Hi. The truism, united we stand, divided we fall, hasn't been more true in our day and age. In the past year and a half alone, there has been a defunding of some critical Western-funded developmental programs, many considered critical. But the bottom line is, although this may have a negative impact in the short term, it is an opportunity for Africa to become self-reliant. Never let a good crisis go to waste, the saying goes. This is where the Africa Prosperity Network's Make Africa Borderless Now movement comes in. And we say emphatically, it is a great opportunity for Africa's collective integration agenda through our single market. Hi and welcome to APN's webinar. Today in our second webinar in the Make Africa Borderless Now series, we will explore some of the many moving parts of African integration. Our topic today is advancing an integrated and visa-free Africa to move, connect and trade freely, overcoming Afrophobia. Our discussion will be split into two parts. The first session will discuss advancing free movement, the right of settlement, and Africa's integration agenda while addressing Afrophobia, that green monster. And the second part will discuss visa-free as a bridgehead in accelerating African movement. We will be hearing a contest setting about the Africa Visa Openness Index or the Avoy Report Review and visa-free regimes as a major step toward a borderless continent. Before introducing our wonderful panelist, I would like to thank our media partners for their support. Asasi Broadcasting Company, where I am speaking from, Channel 1 TV, City FM, and Max 24 TV. A highly distinguished panel today features Her Excellency Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Africa Prosperity Network's Advisory Council Chair, former Chair of the AU Commission, and a long-standing minister in the South African government. Her Excellency Ambassador Amachum Amwa, African Union Commissioner for Health, Humanitarian Affairs, and Social Development. Gabi Asari Ochre-Darko, Esquire, Executive Chairman of the Africa Prosperity Network and co-founder of the Africa Legal Associates in Ghana and Africa Legal Practice International. Dr. Joy Kategekwa, Director of the African Development Bank's Regional Integration Coordination Office. Ziad Hamwi, co-founder and national president of the Borderless Alliance and executive director of Tarzan Limited. Nana Kwame Freedom Bediako, real estate developer, industrialist, and politician. He is chairman of Quali's Group. Emmanuel Kwesi Tabaro, energy policy researcher and international development professional from Uganda. Amin Idris Adum, director of economy, infrastructure, industrialization, trade, and regional integration at Elder Nepad. Dr. Josephine Ochre-Darko, medical doctor, public health specialist, and program head at WITS Reproductive Health and HIV Institute in South Africa. Wode Maya, a proudly African and global African travel vlogger with one of the top travelogues on YouTube. We will also have a comment from Fritz Lukenze, a top Cameroonian health researcher who lives in South Africa. We'll also have some videos for you. Now, to kickstart the program, Mr. Gabi Asari Ochre-Darko, Esquire, Executive Chairman of the Africa Prosperity Network, will set the context for today's webinar. Gabi, you're welcome to the program, where we begin. Actually, shall we begin with a video, and then we'll go to Mr. Gabi Asari Ochre-Darko. Shall we have the video on?
In Accra, during the Africa Prosperity Dialogues, delegates from across the continent and the diaspora came together. For the Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2026, they met to empower SMEs, women, and youth to make Africa borderless now.
We must begin to think of ourselves as Africans, not as Ghanaians, South Africans, Ethiopians.
Even though I'd been paid to perform, I was stopped at the border.
When Africans tried to pay Africans across borders, currencies detoured.
When Africa stood at the crossroads of integration, we did not hesitate. We chose action.
Play your part. It can be done. It must be done. We must have a borderless Africa.
Sign the petition. We want a borderless Africa now.
Africa's prosperity lies in its unity, in its oneness. Many treaties have been signed, but now it's time for execution and action. Sign the petition now at makeafricaborderlessnow.com. Let's build a new future for Africa, one signature at a time. In Accra, during the Africa Prosperity Dialogues, delegates from across the continent and the diaspora came together. For the Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2026, they met to empower SMEs, women, and youth to make Africa borderless now.
We must begin to think of ourselves as Africans, not as Ghanaians, South Africans, Ethiopians.
Even though I'd been paid to perform, I was stopped at the border.
When Africans tried to pay Africans across borders, currencies detoured.
When Africa stood at the crossroads of integration, we did not hesitate. We chose action.
Play your part. It can be done. It must be done. We must have a borderless Africa.
Sign the petition. We want a borderless Africa now.
Africa's prosperity lies in its unity, in its oneness. Many treaties have been signed, but now it's time for execution and action. Sign the petition now at makeafricaborderlessnow.com. borderlessnow.com. Let's build a new future for Africa, one signature at a time.
Leaders and representatives of the government of the African independent states, fellow Africans, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasant duty on behalf of the government and people of Ghana to welcome you, our distinguished guests, to our country. We are deeply grateful and highly honored to have among us such eminent statesmen of free Africa. We hope that your stay in our midst will be happy and enjoyable. And we pray that divine providence will bless and guide our deliberations so that we may arrive at decisions which will be to the mutual benefit of the peace, happiness, and prosperity of our various countries.
For long years, men in Africa have hoped for a meeting such as this, and so it's a high point in African history.
Had the miseries of our continent ended with the slave trade, we might perhaps have found the means of recovering from the wounds which this system inflicted upon us. But alas, a new misfortune, colonialism, befell us. While the slave trade took away from Africa shiploads of our people, colonialism enslaved them in their own territories. We repudiate and condemn all forms of racialism. For racialism not only injures those against whom it is used, but warps and perverts the very people who preach and protect it. And when it becomes a guiding principle in the life of any nation, as it has become in some other parts of Africa, then that nation digs its own grave. It is inconceivable that a racial minority will be able forever to maintain its totalitarian domination over an awakened majority. We, the independent states of Africa, seek to eliminate racialism by our own example of a tolerant, multiracial community reflecting the freely expressed will of the people based upon universal adult suffrage.
Let us remind ourselves that this is not a new conversation. In 1980 in Lagos, Nigeria, under the Lagos Plan of Action, we promised ourselves that we would enhance intra-African trade, that goods from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia would move to Casablanca in Morocco, that we would have goods moving from South Africa to Maputo, and we said that we were going to achieve this through the regional economic communities such as ECOWAS, SADC, COMESA, the Maghreb, the East African Community, the IGAD. But if you go on the ground, the reality is very different. Aliko Dangote, whose image is displayed outside of this auditorium, famously said that he needs more visas to travel across an African continent than an American blogger who has the passport of the United States of America. That is the reality of our continent.
A united Africa makes sense. Gabi Asari Oche Darko Esquire, Executive Chairman of the Africa Prosperity Network. You will now set the context for today's webinar.
Thank you, Prince. Distinguished speakers, moderators, participants, and fellow Africans joining us from across the continent and the diaspora. Happy African Union Day. As we mark AU Day, it is important to remember the context of that founding summit 63 years ago. It came 78 years after the Berlin Conference of 1885, where Africa was partitioned into colonial boundaries that continue to restrict our movements, divide our markets, and slow our progress. When the Organization of African Unity was founded in Addis Ababa on this day in 1963, African leaders were already divided over how quickly Africa should unite. Kwame Nkrumah and the Casablanca Group argued for immediate political and economic integration, believing Africa could not prosper while divided into small, weak, and disconnected states. Others preferred a slower path, built around state sovereignty and gradual cooperation. In the end, the gradualists prevailed. Yet history has shown that many of Nkrumah's warnings were prophetic. Although progress has been made through regional blocs, Africans still face more difficulty traveling across Africa than many foreigners face entering our continent. Our markets remain fragmented, our people separated, and our collective prosperity detained and delayed. At the time the OAU was formed, only 32 African states were independent. The whole of Southern Africa remained under colonial or apartheid rule. Yet leaders across the continent, from the Republic of Algeria to the Kingdom of Burundi then, spoke passionately about solidarity with liberation struggles because they understood that no African was truly free until all Africans were free. That spirit of Pan-African solidarity remains alive today, despite disturbing scenes of what has been described as AFROPHOBIA in parts of South Africa. But this challenge is not unique to South Africa. Across the continent, laws, systems, and attitudes often treat fellow Africans as outsiders instead of partners in a shared destiny. Rather than retreat, they should strengthen our resolve to accelerate African integration and address the socio-economic frustrations that extremists exploit. Today's conversation is therefore not about lamenting problems. It is about advancing solutions, especially around free movement and visa-free travel for Africans. We also seek to draw attention to the AU Protocol on Free Movement of Persons, Right of Residence, and Right of Establishment adopted in 2018, which itself draws strength from the Abuja Treaty of 1991. 35 years ago, African leaders adopted the Abuja Treaty, establishing the African Economic Community with the ambition that by 2028, let me repeat that by 2028, Africa would achieve a single market with free movement of people, goods, and services, a common passport, customs union, single currency, and central bank. It is what gave rise to the African Union in 2002 and the African Continental Free Trade Area in 2021. Recognizing the OAU was not structured to achieve that mission, African leaders met in Sirte, Libya, in 1999, when the Sirte Declaration set in motion the transformation of the OAU into the African Union to principally accelerate political and economic integration. Yet today, only 4 countries have ratified the Free Movement Protocol, and only a handful of African states offer visa-free access to fellow Africans. That is why this month's development deserves celebration. Today, Ghana officially implements visa-free entry for Africans following executive approval granted in December 2024. APN is proud that this commitment was first publicly announced on our platform during APD 2024, after which we consistently advocated for its implementation. We commend former President Nana Akufo-Addo for initiating the process and President John Mahama for completing it. We also commend Togo for taking a similar step last week, I think on 18th of May. These developments signal that Africa may finally be moving from the declarations to implementation. But visa-free travel must only be the beginning. Without free movement of people, goods, and services, there can be no genuine African continental free trade area. A single market cannot function if Africans themselves cannot move freely to trade, invest, work, innovate, and collaborate across our borders. At a time when Africans increasingly face restrictions abroad, especially in Europe and America, we must make our continent more open, connected, and of course, prosperous. That is why the Africa Prosperity Network launched the Make Africa Borderless Now movement, principally to mobilize Africans and friends of Africa everywhere to push for the implementation of the very treaties and protocols our leaders themselves have adopted. Central to this effort is the AU Free Movement Protocol. The first phase is Visa-Free Africa, but the broader vision is a truly integrated continent where Africans can live, work, and build businesses freely across borders. So on this AU Day, let us challenge ourselves and our leaders to gather the courage to implement what they have already signed. I also wish to take this opportunity to make a respectful appeal to President John Dramani Mahama, my own national leader. Mr. President, we commend today's historic step, but let Ghana now become the 5th country to ratify the Free Movement Protocol. And as we look forward to Ghana's platinum anniversary and your own chairmanship of the AU next year, please encourage ECOWAS leaders to lead the campaign to secure the minimum 15 ratifications required to bring AU's Free Movement Protocol into force. And let me conclude by thanking our distinguished speakers, moderators, I suppose that includes me, huh?
Yes, it does.
Yes. Participants and audiences joining us from around the world. Your voices and commitment keep alive the dream of an integrated, prosperous, and borderless Africa. Happy AU Day, and I encourage everyone listening to join the movement and sign the petition at www.makeafricaborderlessnow.com. Thank you, Prince Moses.
Thank you very much, Gabby Asari Ochredako, Esquire. I like saying Esquire because you are a lawyer and Executive Chairman of the Africa Prosperity Network. Thank you very much, and this is why we need to sign the petition now.
In Accra, during the Africa Prosperity Dialogues, delegates from across the continent and the diaspora came together for the Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2026. They met to empower SMEs, women, and youth to make Africa borderless now.
We must begin to think of ourselves as Africans, not as Ghanaians, South Africans, Ethiopians.
Even though I'd been paid to perform, I was stopped at the border.
When Africans tried to pay Africans across borders, currencies detoured.
When Africa stood at the crossroads of integration, we did not hesitate. We chose action.
Play your part. It can be done. It must be done. We must have a borderless Africa.
Sign the petition. We want a borderless Africa now.
Africa's prosperity lies in its unity, in its oneness. Many treaties have been signed, but now it's time for execution and action. Sign the petition now at makeafricaborderlessnow.com. Let's build a new future for Africa, one signature at a time.
Sign the petition now, one signature at a time. We need those millions of signatures to make this happen. So thank you very much for joining us in this webinar series by the Africa Prosperity Network. We shall now go to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, from where Her Excellency Ambassador Amachum Amwa, African Union Commissioner for Health, Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development, will be delivering her keynote message.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, wonderful. Your Excellency, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Chairperson of the APN Advisory Board and former Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mr. Gabi Asare Ochredako, Executive Chairman and founder of the Africa Prosperity Network, my dear sister Joy, Director of the AFDB Regional Integration Coordination Office, distinguished representatives of the private sector, civil society, academia, youth networks, and development partners, ladies and gentlemen. It is both an honor and a privilege to join you on this significant occasion of Africa Day for this timely and important conversation convened under the theme, Advancing a Visa-Free Africa for Africans to Move, Connect, and Trade Freely. At the outset, allow me to sincerely commend the Africa Prosperity Network and the Make Africa Borderless Now campaign for bringing renewed visibility, urgency, and citizen energy to one of the most strategic pillars of Africa's integration agenda. I also wish to acknowledge the presence and valuable contributions of all distinguished speakers and participants who continue to champion the cause of African unity, shared prosperity, and continental integration. Today's conversation is both symbolic and practical. It is symbolic because Africa Day reminds us of the unfinished work of Pan-Africanism. It is practical because the freedom of Africans to move, connect, trade, invest, study, and prosper across their own continent is no longer a distant aspiration. It is a development imperative. This conversation speaks directly to the aspirations of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. An Africa that is integrated, prosperous, peaceful, people-centered, and driven by its own citizens. As we commemorate Africa Day, we are reminded of the enduring vision of the founders of Pan-Africanism, who understood that Africa's political and economic future could only be secured through unity, solidarity, and integration. More than 6 decades ago, Kwame Nkrumah reminded us that the forces that unite us are intrinsic and greater than the superimposed influences that keeps us apart. Those words remain profoundly relevant today. They remind us that the borders inherited from history must not become barriers to Africa's destiny. They remind us that the African integration is not simply a policy objective. It is a historical responsibility. And they remind us that the dream of a borderless Africa is not new. It is deeply rooted in the Pan-African conviction that borders should serve as bridges of cooperation, not barriers to opportunity, as channels of exchange, not walls of exclusion, and as instruments of integration, not obstacles to shared prosperity. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the issue of free movement is not merely about easing travel requirements. It is fundamentally about advancing Africa's economic transformation and strengthening our collective prosperity. Free movement is directly linked to the successful implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Increased intra-African trade and investment, labor mobility and skills transfer, tourism development, innovation and entrepreneurship, educational, scientific, and cultural exchange, and stronger people-to-people connectivity across the continent. Simply put, Africa cannot fully integrate economically while Africans themselves remain restricted from moving freely across their own continent. Goods cannot move efficiently when people cannot. Markets cannot expand when entrepreneurs are constrained. And the AFCFTA cannot reach its full transformative promise if the African citizen, the trader, the student, the innovator, the artist, the investor, and the young entrepreneur remains delayed at the border. Despite notable progress over the years, barriers to mobility continue to impede the realization of our continental ambitions. According to the Africa Visa Openness Report 2024, African citizens still require visas to travel to nearly 45% of other African countries, while only a limited percentage of travel routes across the continent are fully visa-free. The consequences are far-reaching. For many African entrepreneurs and traders, especially women engaged in informal sector cross-border trade, obtaining visas can be costly, time-consuming, and administratively burdensome. For students and researchers, mobility barriers limit academic exchange, innovation, and knowledge sharing. For young professionals and investors, restrictions reduce opportunities for employment, partnerships, enterprise growth, and market expansion. These realities weaken regional value chains, constrain economic growth, discourage continental competitiveness, and slow the implementation of the AFCFTA. As Mwalimu Julius Nyerere once observed, unity will not make us rich, but it can make it difficult for Africa and the African peoples to be disregarded and humiliated. This is why free movement is not a secondary issue. It is central to Africa's dignity, competitiveness, and place in the world. The African Union recognized these realities when it adopted in 2018 the protocol to the treaty establishing the African Economic Community relating to free movement of persons, rights of residence, and rights of establishment as one of the flagship initiatives of Agenda 2063. The protocol provides a transformative continental framework aimed at facilitating visa-free entry for African citizens, the right of residence, the right of establishment, enhanced labor mobility, regional economic integration, mutual recognition of qualifications, stronger social and cultural exchange, and orderly, safe, and well-governed mobility across the continent. In its own language, the protocol recognizes that the free movement of persons, capital, goods, and services will promote integration and Pan-Africanism, enhance science, technology, education, and research, foster tourism, facilitate intra-African trade and investment, increase remittances within Africa, promote labor mobility, create employment, improve standards of living, and support the mobilization and utilization of Africa's human and material resources for self-reliance and development. This, to me, is a very powerful vision, but it is also a practical roadmap. However, while the vision is clear, implementation has not progressed at the pace initially envisaged. Ratification, we've already heard, remains limited, and the protocol has not yet entered into force. This calls for renewed political commitment, stronger public awareness, targeted advocacy, and sustained collaboration among member states, regional economic communities, AU organs, the private sector, civil society, academia, media, and citizen-led movements. At the same time, we must acknowledge and celebrate the progress already being made across the continent. Several member states have demonstrated leadership by easing entry requirements for African citizens, introducing visa on arrival arrangements, or adopting visa-free regimes that promote openness as a catalyst for investment, tourism, trade, and people-to-people exchange. Countries such as Benin, the Gambia, Ghana, Togo, and Rwanda, among others, continue to demonstrate that openness is not a risk to be feared, but an opportunity to be managed with confidence, coordination, and modern systems. Within ECOWAS, citizens have long benefited from regional free movement arrangements that facilitate trade, labor mobility, and social interaction across member states. Similarly, the East African community has advanced regional mobility through common travel arrangements and integration initiatives that continue to strengthen cross-border cooperation. These examples clearly demonstrate that progress is achievable where there is political will, institutional coordination, regional cooperation, and citizen support. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move forward, allow me to highlight 4 priorities. First, we must accelerate ratification and domestication of the AU Free Movement Protocol. Continental commitments must be translated into national laws, policies, and implementation frameworks that produce tangible benefits for African citizens. Ratification alone is not enough. Implementation must follow. Declarations must become systems. Systems must deliver results, and results must be felt in the daily lives of Africans. Second, we must strengthen trust, cooperation, and coordination on border governance, migration management, and security. Free movement and security should not be viewed as contradictory objectives. On the contrary, well-managed mobility supported by modern technology, information sharing, biometric systems, interoperable data, coordinated border management, and respect for national laws can strengthen both security and economic integration. The question is not whether Africa should move. The question is how Africa moves safely, orderly, productively, and with dignity. Third, we must deepen public awareness and citizen engagement. The success of Africa's integration agenda depends not only on governments, but also on the active participation of African citizens, particularly youth, women, entrepreneurs, academics, artists, innovators, and cross-border traders. Citizens must understand that free movement is not merely a political aspiration. It is a practical tool for economic empowerment, social connection, and shared prosperity. The student seeking education, the woman trader crossing with goods, the artist sharing culture, the entrepreneur pursuing markets, and the researcher building knowledge networks must all see themselves in this agenda. Free movement must become a people's agenda. Fourth, partnerships will remain essential. Government alone cannot achieve this vision. Strong partnerships among regional economic communities, the private sector, civil society organizations, development partners, academia, the media, and citizen-led movements are indispensable for advancing advocacy, implementation, and public support. In this regard, the Make Africa Borderless Now campaign represents an important platform for mobilizing continental awareness and citizen-driven advocacy. It reminds us that the integration is not only negotiated in conference rooms. It is lived by traders at the borders. It is lived by students crossing for education. It is lived by families divided by colonial boundaries. It is lived by entrepreneurs seeking markets. It is lived by artists sharing culture. And it is lived by young Africans determined to build a future without artificial limitations. As Nelson Mandela reminded us, it always seems impossible until it is done. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a visa-free Africa is both achievable and necessary. It is necessary for unlocking Africa's economic potential. It is necessary for advancing continental integration. It is necessary for empowering Africa's youth, women, and entrepreneurs. It is necessary for strengthening the AFCFTA, and it is necessary for realizing the promise of Agenda 2063. To build the Africa we want, we must build an Africa where borders connect rather than divide, where Africans can travel with dignity across their own continent, where mobility is safe, orderly, and productive, and where movement becomes a driver of prosperity, innovation, solidarity, and peace. Kwame Nkrumah's enduring call still speaks to us today. We face neither east nor west. We face forward. Facing forward today means moving decisively from aspiration to implementation. Facing forward means moving from declarations to measurable progress. Facing forward means moving from fragmented approaches to coordinated continental action. Facing forward means recognizing that the African passport must not only be a document of identity, but a symbol of belonging. And facing forward means ensuring that the young African innovator, the woman cross-border trader, the student, the researcher, the investor, the artist, and the entrepreneur can see the continent not as a collection of obstacles, but as a common space of opportunity. Together, let us build an Africa where Africans can move freely, connect freely, trade freely, and prosper together. Let us make our borders instruments of cooperation. Let us make mobility a pathway to dignity. Let us make a borderless Africa not a slogan, but a lived reality for every African citizen. I thank you for your kind attention and wish all of us fruitful deliberations. Happy Africa Union Day to all of us.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ama Chum, African Union Commissioner for Health, Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development. You spoke on advancing an integrated and visa-free Africa to move, connect and trade freely, overcoming Afrophobia. As explained earlier, for those who just joined us, this webinar is split into two parts. The first broadly addresses free movement and Africa's integration agenda, and the second part will delve into visa-free as a bridgehead in accelerating African movement. Now, to set the mood for our first exciting session, we will have a report from Deutsche Welle, followed by a vox pop from Chris Lekunze, all about the experience of xenophobia, Afrophobia in South Africa. Some disagree with that, some think it is true, but as our chairman, Gabi Asario-Cheridako, said, it is something that is experienced across Africa. Let's take a listen.
I'm Fritz Lekunze. I live in South Africa. I studied here at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. I studied molecular medicine. I went up to study at the Imperial College in London, and I came back here. I work here as a researcher in health. I do most of my work on the continent, but I live in Johannesburg. I have had a really positive experience living in this country. Many years ago, when I was a student, there used to be talk about foreigners in this country. And it was there was a perception of hostility towards foreigners. And we would be stopped on the street and asked for our passports to prove that you were legal in this country. With a study permit, I didn't have a bad experience. I used to go around with, in my first year, with my roommate, Themba Matebula, a really nice South African guy. When they asked me for my passport, they would ask him for his ID too. So there wasn't really a bad experience. I can remember once going to Soweto and in the black community, meeting people, and people really genuinely being happy to meet a foreign student. I had grown up in Cameroon, I had known about Manu Dibango, and when I went to Soweto, there was a man who brought up all LPs of Manu Dibango and spoke to me about Manu Dibango. I didn't really have experience of Manu Dibango's music, but he was telling me a lot about Manu Dibango. This was an older person who was genuinely happy to see me. From these people, I learned a lot about Ubuntu, which later on in my life, now I am studying Ubuntu, which is an African philosophy that a person is a person through other people. It's an idea that we come into this world knowing really nothing, and we learn how to be human through other human beings. This is an idea that has been championed in South Africa, but it's common throughout Africa. As Africans, we always welcome other people. We meet people, we learn from them. So my experience as an immigrant living in South Africa legally has really been a positive one.
That was Chris Lekunze, who is an African health researcher residing in Johannesburg, South Africa. He spoke about his positive experience as an African resident in South Africa. You know, he did his studies over there, and he has evolved as a health professional in the international community in Johannesburg. We did promise you a video from Deutsche Welle, but due to time constraint, we shall go to our next session. However, there are a few statistics that I would like to share with you. Now, according to South Africa's Department of Statistics, in 2022, there were 2.4 million immigrants from Africa in that country. 1 million of them were illegal at the time, that is in 2022. And majority of these immigrants in South Africa were from Southern Africa, that is the SADC region. It is important to note that the Southern African region, that is the SADC community, Southern African Development Community, does not have a multilateral free movement of persons like ECOWAS has. However, we're not just dealing with a South African problem. There appears to be issues across the continent with free movement. And to help us look at this from a broader perspective, we shall now go to the crux of the subject at hand. And I would like to begin with a presentation from Amin Idris Adum, Director of Economy, Infrastructure, Industrialization, Trade and Regional Integration at ALDA NEPAD. His presentation will unpack whether we are actually building an integrated Africa or just building better paperwork for an Africa that still lives in fragments. Hello, Amin, are you on?
Yeah, I'm on. I just can't present because I don't have the right to present, but I can speak.
Right.
Actually, is that okay?
Yes.
Because I don't see anywhere I can actually present. The system doesn't allow me to pass on slides.
Oh, we're sorry about that. I'm sure the technical team will be working on that right now. But please go ahead and start your discussion. I'm sure your presentation. I'm sure you have something for us.
All right. I think what I want to say is that we have made quite good in terms of integration, but our integration system has not really built people, and that's the central argument I want to make today. Africa has done serious work on trade architecture. For instance, the presentation is coming. I don't know, but Africa have done quite serious work on trade architecture. We have built institutions. We have built protocol. We have built schedules, rules of origin and market frameworks. And the ACFTA itself is a historic achievement. But the question is, integration for who, for whom? Because if goods can move faster than students, workers, artists, entrepreneurs, journalists, and families, then we have built a market, but not yet a community. The contradiction is visible in the numbers. The ACFTA has been widely ratified, but the free movement protocol remains far behind. So we have accelerated trade integration, but delayed human integration. And that is the problem. We are trying to integrate economics before integrating people. And the paradox, if you want, is here. Millions of Africans live in another African country. Intra-African migration has grown significantly since 2010. Most sub-Saharan African migrants remain within the region. So the human reality of integration already exists, but our system have not caught up. A young African can move, but may not have their qualifications recognized. A student may want to study in another African country, but the scholarship architecture is weak. A professional may find an opportunity across the border, but face work permit restriction. A family may cross border, but nationality laws may force impossible choices. So the issue is not whether Africans want integration. They already practice it. The issue is that our legal, educational, administrative and social systems are not designed to support the African lives that already exist across borders. And there is another dimension we rarely discuss, which is what we call narrative power. Integration is not only about borders. It is also about imagination. Who tells African who they are, who define our conflicts, our ambitions, our heroes, our failures, our future. Today, a large part of African media infrastructure, especially in television, satellite, broadcasting, international news, and digital distribution, is, I would say, controlled or influenced from outside the continent. And this matters because people cannot integrate around a story they do not actually control. So if African children come to consume mainly through foreign filters, if African crises are interpreted from Paris, London, Doha, or Washington, if our creative industries are fragmented by language and colonial inheritance, then we should not be surprised that African identity remains weak in practice. We don't only need road, visa, and trade routes. We need really shared platforms, shared stories, shared cultural production, and African-owned media infrastructures. And without that, I would say integration remains administrative. It does not really become emotional. Now, the human gap is where integration becomes very concrete. Cross-border marriage, dual citizenship, recognition of degrees, students, actual mobility, professional licensing, public service across, access, these are not abstract policy issues. They determine whether African can actually build lives across Africa. If a child of a cross-border marriage must choose one nationality, that's not integration for me. If a doctor trained in one African country cannot easily practice in another, that's not integration. And if thousands of young Africans apply to Pan-African institutions, but only a few hundreds are admitted, that is demand without capacity. So we have movement, but we don't have mechanism. And this is why I think that this convention of or recognition of higher education qualification matters. That's what the Commission was saying. It is not a technical education instrument only. It's really an integration instrument. It says that African knowledge should circulate across African borders. UNESCO frames it precisely around recognition of studies, diplomas, and degree in higher education. If skills cannot move, Africa cannot integrate. And two more things here before I conclude. Number one, we have actually lessons around the world on how this works. Europe, for instance, offers one useful lesson. Identity was not only legislated, it was really experienced. You have Erasmus. Erasmus program was launched before the deepening of the political union. Students moved, they lived together, they studied together, they formed friendship, families, companies, and network across borders. That have created a generation for whom Europe was not just a treaty, it was a lived experience. And Europe invested seriously into that. The current Erasmus program has had a finance envelope of more than $26 billion over a period of less than 10 years. So Africa cannot copy Europe mechanically, I know, but we can learn from the sequencing. We cannot build African integration only through summits. We must build it through schools, universities, youth exchange, language platform, media, sports, civil society exchange, and shared institutions. Treaties may create the legal space, but people create the political reality. So what should we do? First, I think we need our own Erasmus, not a symbolic program. We need a serious funded continental mobility system that allows African students to study across regions at scale. Second, we need full ratification and implementation of this convention. A degree from Dakar should have value in Nairobi or in Johannesburg. A qualification from Accra should be readable in Kigali or in Algiers. Third, we need scale. We should scale the AU volunteer model into structured African civil service exchange. Young Africans should serve as in ministries, municipalities, hospitals, innovation agencies, and development institutions across the continent. And fourth, I think we need African-owned media and digital platforms, not only state media, private, I would say sector-led, multilingual, commercially viable platforms that can speak to African audiences at scale. So the solution here, let me close with culture. Africa does not lack common identity. It lacks the system to experience it. We have cross-border language. We have oral traditions. We have music, food, trade, markets, memory, struggle, migration, and family ties that already exceed borders. Institutions like the African Union Akalan and the African Union Salto can become far more strategic if combined with artificial intelligence to offer translation tools, digitalization of oral archives, African language database, terminology platforms, and education content in African language. So all the things I think that should, so the question from, this is what actually culture becoming from. Back again. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, please go on. You're still on, yeah.
Yeah. I was lost here. So the question is not whether Africa has a common identity. The question is whether we are willing to finance the platforms that allow Africans to live that identity.
One second,
if we can ratify...
one second. Is it possible to turn your video on, please?
Yes, of course.
Okay, please. Thank you.
Hold on. Yeah. The video is here.
All right.
So you can see me. So as I was saying, to conclude, the question is not whether how can I say that? It's not whether Africa has a common identity or not. We have the common identity. The question is whether we are willing to finance the platform that allow Africans to live that identity. We fund African, who will fund African Erasmus? That's one. Who will build the African media platform? Who scale degree recognitions? Who turns your mobility into policy? If we can ratify trade, I think we can actually recognize and we can organize encounters, because Africa will not be integrated only by treaties, it will be integrated by people. That's what I wanted to share on this first point about the culture itself. Then I will come back later to go beyond visa, especially in terms of regional integration through economic inclusion everywhere. Thank you very much.
This is incredible, Amin. I mean, we all understand the essence of cultural integration before economic integration. We have all seen how Europe did it, and thank you very much for sharing the experience of Erasmus. Is there anything like that in Africa? I do not know, but I also do know that the fragmentation is deep. When we travel across regions in Africa, sometimes we feel we're strangers in our own home, and it is something I believe we should be very deliberate, very intentional about changing. So thank you very much, Amin. I'm sure you will be brought back. Right now, we will go to Ziad Hamwi, who is co-founder and president of Borderless Alliance. Now, Ziad, are you on?
I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you, and you are wearing an elegant African wear. Thank you very much for joining us. Yes, and so you are co-founder and president of the Borderless Alliance. Your organization works on cross-border trade facilitation. Would you please tell us about some of the absurd or costly non-tariff barriers you have documented that stem directly from movement restrictions?
Well, thank you, Moses, and for including me on this session and for the pertinent question. Indeed, Borderless Alliance's mission is about promoting the free movement of goods and people across West Africa. And when we look at cross-border trade along West African corridors, the most absurd and economically regressive non-tariff barrier isn't the structural tariff. It's what I would like to call the paper versus pavement documentation asymmetry. And while regional regulations provide a framework guiding the free movement of cross-border goods, local enforcement rigidly targets the human operator rather than the cargo itself. So you might be a trader with your goods and crossing the borders, and the goods might be qualified for moving across, but then the mover himself is being questioned and being held back. And because informal small-scale traders constitute about 60% of cross-border operations in West Africa, and because women represent the vast majority of this segment, they bear a highly disproportionate share of this friction. Field research conducted by Borderless Alliance and by others highlight three devastating and interconnected realities on this barrier. First, the documentation trap. The small-scale cross-border trade report of the Trade Facilitation West Africa reveals that 40% or more of small-scale cross-border traders have informal or no schooling whatsoever. This fuels a massive information asymmetry, leaving more than 90% of traders with limited or zero awareness of official regional trading protocols like the ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme, ETLS. And so this leads to the second point, where the extortion comes in, because the information deficit gives the border officials immense leverage. The absence of transparent border information desks have allowed predatory unofficial intermediaries to thrive. You know, in Ghana, we call them the Goro boys. In Nigeria, they're called the touts. In Benin, they call them the plebes. There are variations of them all across the continent. So these guys charge arbitrary fees just to navigate basic clearance, which is supposed to be available for all. And the data provides that at least 40% of traders across surveyed corridors are routinely exposed to bribery. Worse yet, fewer than half ever receive an official receipt, dropping to an abysmal 26% along the Lagos-Kano-Niamey corridor. Imagine, 3/4 unreceipted payments. And so this leads to the third interconnected point, which is the food loss tragedy, where the human friction triggers cascading logistical details. So if your agricultural produce is legally duty-free under the regional laws, the drivers and the women traders carrying them are routinely held up for hours unending at overlapping checkpoints over arbitrary identity queries. For those carrying fresh food, these multi-hour border delays cause massive product spoilage and direct destruction of market capital. And so here the absurdity lies in trying to modernize our continental trade framework while subjecting the humans moving the goods to analog predatory border practices. Now we have liberalized tariff on trade on paper, but we have normalized human extortion on the pavement, and that needs to be fixed, especially today. We need to talk about it on Africa Union Day. Over to you, Moses.
All right. Thank you very much, Ziad. So we've started understanding the several moving parts to this free movement agenda. First, we heard Amin talk about the need for cultural integration, so the cultural dimension to the free movement agenda. And then you were talking about information asymmetries where policy clashes with practice. So we're going to go to our third speaker, who is Emmanuel Kwesi Tabaro, Deputy Director, Leo Africa Institute. Kwesi, are you around?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so we have your video. Excellent. We can see you now. So my question to you now is, across East Africa, we see both progress, that is with respect to the East African passport, and persistent tensions, that is anti-immigrant rhetoric across East Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, and the whatnot. And drawing from your experience at the Leo Africa Institute, what are the underlying cultural and psychological drivers of the fear or dislike of the other among young Africans who have grown up in the era of the EAC, which was founded in the early 2000s, and more recently the AFCFTA? We heard Amin talk about Erasmus program in Europe. We don't have a thing like that in Africa. So tell us about these drivers of fear.
Sure. Well, thank you, Moses. Just to clarify that I have not been at the Leo Africa Institute for 2 years now. So I used to be at the Leo Africa Institute, but the last 2 years I've been here in the US doing my graduate studies. But the question is quite pertinent, and I think my experience at the Leo Africa Institute can talk more about what we're seeing in East Africa. I think I am hopeful seeing what young people in East Africa are doing, and I'd like to appreciate the example given by Amin about European institutions like Erasmus. I think that's the work that we were trying to do at the Leo Africa Institute for the 8 years that I was there. I remember we started this fellowship program, the Young and Emerging Leaders Project, that mainly focused on Greater Eastern Africa. So we had fellows from across 8 countries convening, whether in Uganda or Kenya or Rwanda or Tanzania. And by the time I left, I think we had built a network of over 120 emerging leaders in these countries. I had traveled each and every one of those countries, seen the very problems that many speakers have spoken about today, issues at the border closures in our region, and then the efforts led by young people to collaborate across all these different challenges. And I think when I see that, it makes me hopeful. So the question would be, and in response to what you're saying, why are we seeing these tensions in the region or on the continent? I'll focus on Eastern Africa. I think the last 25 or 30 years in East Africa, we've been in what you would consider a peace dividend that began with the end of terrible tragedy in Rwanda in 1994, the overthrow of Mobutu in 1997, the restarting of the East African community in the year 2000, 99 or 2000, if I'm not mistaken. And then, of course, the coming into place of the African Union. So a whole generation that I belong to grew up harnessing this, what I would consider 25 or 30-year peace dividend that I think has begun to show signs of fracturing. It's sad to see in a region like East Africa that I've been privileged to travel in and work. We're beginning to hear sentiments around genocide appearing again, instances of Rwandophobia in Eastern DRC, closed borders between member states of the same economic union. These are really concerning. But I think the solution lies not just in the integration at the institutional level, which is currently being led by the African Union and the regional bodies as well as the countries, but people-to-people diplomacy, which space I think civil society occupies. And I think organizations like APN, the Leo Africa Institute, the Africa Leadership University, and all these other great Pan-African institutions that have come into being in the last 10 or 15 years can help bridge this crucial gap that the institutions of the African Union have not been able to address in the last 20 or so years of us pushing this effort. So I think the two are complementary, and that the intervention of civil society does not in any way mean that the African Union or the former institutions have failed, but it means that the journey towards integration between our countries, between our people, becomes a lot easier if we go beyond pronouncements by our leaders and executives in Addis to having young people actually following through with these exchanges. Now, how are we going to fund that? I think there's a framework. There are several frameworks that our leaders have proposed. When he was AU Chair, President Paul Kagame in 2018 proposed a funding mechanism for the African Union. Several other leaders, including President Ruto, have presented similar ideas. I think the next 5 or so years, we should see how do we harmonize these ideas by our leaders, and how do we leverage some of these resources and channel them to our civil society organizations. Unfortunately, many times, when we talk about African issues, we tend to speak as if we're the African Union is a non-profit. So we emphasize our mission, our objective, our aspirations, and not so much what is in our power to do. And I hope that that's something that the AU can do going forward, because we are living in a world that is currently in the midst of a rupture. And I think whatever constraints the African Union or the African institutions had in the past have weakened, and we can now go for what we really want to achieve. Thank you. Moses, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kwesi. Thank you very much. So you are talking about collaboration among young people, which has been impressive so far, considering the short number of years that the EAC has been in existence. We also heard you talk about concerning hostilities, growing hostilities, perhaps burgeoning in the sub-region where there is Rwandophobia, and something needs to be done. So, as I said earlier, there are so many moving parts to this. There is culture, as mentioned by Amin. There is information asymmetries, as mentioned by Ziad. And you are talking about, on the one hand, there is incredible collaboration among young people, I'm sure, through music and stuff like that. And then on the other hand, there is that political concern where there is that Rwandophobia. So thank you very much. We shall now go to Dr. Josephine Otridako. Are you here with us, Dr. Josephine Otridako? as we wait for Dr. Josephine Ochridako, perhaps we shall go to the next speaker and come back to her. So we shall perhaps go to the next speaker. Other than that, shall we have the a break?
A warm welcome to our viewers across Africa and across the world. This is Thuso Khumalo. I'm coming to you live from Pretoria. Here we are at the Ghana High Commission in Pretoria. The people that you see behind me here, these are Ghanaian citizens who have decided to repatriate back to their country because of threats of violence that's happening across the country. We've had marches, anti-immigrant marches, of course, people marching, demanding that all illegal or undocumented immigrants leave. And these people have felt unsafe. Some of them, they testify that in the areas where they have been staying, things have been very difficult and they've been feeling unsafe. So they've come here to the High Commission to be registered so that they are processed. But just to give you more, I've got the High Commissioner here, the Ghana High Commissioner Benjamin Kwasi. He's going to tell us quite in detail as to what is happening in this place. But we've got dozens of people that have come here to be registered to go back to Ghana because of that. Welcome, High Commissioner. Just face the side and tell us what's happening here. What are these people doing here?
I think that these are people that are in here voluntarily as part of those who wants to be repatriated back home. We are starting the process of screening them and ensuring that they take all the dots that they have to take so that on Wednesday they will be the part of the 300 people that will be going to Ghana.
And why? What reasons are they giving you to be here? Are they feeling threatened? They've been attacked?
Well, their lives have come to a standstill. They don't feel safe. They don't feel happy. The challenges as to these demonstrations, this rather unrest, xenophobic attacks on them, most of them feel that their time here is done because they believe that they are here to work genuinely to help the country and also to help themselves. If that purpose is defeated, then they don't know the reason why they should continue to be in this country. So they are willing and ready to go back home to go start life all over.
With the group of people that have been here, are there some that have been physically attacked, or is the threats and the marches that happen?
I think with the numbers that we have here, about 10, 20 people that we've documented have been attacked. Physical abuse, physical attacks. And I believe that it's not right in the Committee of Nations, especially in the AU model, that we'll be doing these sort of things to one another as Africans.
We've seen Ghana taking South Africa even to the AU. Does it mean Ghana supports illegal immigration here in South Africa? What's the stance of that?
I think Ghana's problem is that the approach to which we resolve the issue. Globally, we know that illegal migration has always been a challenge, a big challenge. How we solve it proactively is what the difference is. We've engaged your South African authorities on several occasions. They've been very, very helpful. But we have move from that point to the point where the demonstrators don't listen to whatever government says again. That is where the challenge is, because at the end of the day, they are taking the laws into their own hands. I remember President Ramaphosa giving a statement condemning this act, only for the same demonstrators to say that they've given foreigners till June 30th and that they will not listen to the president. What does that mean? That is disrespect for authority, and I think that is something that we all have to frown upon.
Just give us a rundown of what is happening here and how will it culminate into traveling and when?
So once we are done with the screening of them, we'll let them know the numbers that are going to Ghana. We are expecting to have about 200, 300 people here today. Home Affairs will start setting up on Wednesday at 10 a.m. today for them to be able to leave on Wednesday at 6 a.m. to Ghana.
The other groups, since we had there about 800 of them that have shown interest?
So the first group has an aircraft that will take 300. After some few days, we'll take another 300, and then there will be a third flight for 300, making sure that we get everybody back home.
Is it a set moment that Africans would feel unsafe in an African country?
That is where the Pan-African dream that we all believe we should have has fallen limbo in South Africa. I sometimes listen to the
Right, thank you. You saw that report from Deutsche Welle about the evacuation of Ghanaians from South Africa. You heard the High Commissioner in South Africa talking to the reporter from Deutsche Welle.
Prince, I think let's not forget that the issue there, I mean, from the High Commissioner's own admission, is that you are talking about illegal immigrants, essentially. Okay? And you made the point when you started by saying that even the majority of so-called illegal immigrants in South Africa are from Zimbabwe. And you made a very useful point, which I think we shouldn't forget, which is that if it was to be within ECOWAS, they wouldn't be considered as illegal immigrants because we have free movement within ECOWAS. The important thing is that when you come here, you're supposed to have a job.
Yes.
Okay? But in South Africa, even if you have a job, you are still considered illegal immigrant unless you go through a process.
A legal process.
A legal process. Okay? And that, I suppose, is where some have difficulties. You know, so I think really it's important that if SADC hasn't taken the steps that ECOWAS has, those are the things that they should be looking at. And I think South Africa itself has that leadership within the regional bloc to push for that. Because essentially, you can't undervalue the contribution of Zimbabweans to the workforce,
to the South African economy, since
South
time
Africa,
immemorial,
and
with the mining industry.
Economy. Yes. So those are the things. Because really, if the truth be told, because of South Africa's, if you like, relative strength in industrialization on our continent, South Africa stands to benefit more than a lot of other African countries through integration and a single market, because they have a lot more to offer in terms of manufactured products and the rest of it. So really, I think those are some of the things that we have to look at. But let's bring on the next.
Yes, absolutely. And as you said, they do not have a multilateral agreement in SADC, that is in the South African Development Community, among themselves for visa-free. We do have that. They have bilateral agreements. And so if South Africa doesn't have it with Namibia, Namibians who go there will be considered illegal. Over here,
unless they go through the process
absolutely
to legitimize their stay.
Absolutely. So next, we will go to Nana Kwame Freedom Bediako, who will deliver something quite exciting. Now, Nana Kwame Freedom Bediako, we know you're a strong Pan-Africanist. 4 years ago, you took on our leaders on the enforcement of the Free Movement Protocol. 4 years on, are you happy? Are you a happy man? You have 4 minutes.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Moses. And I like the way that you've pegged me with 4 minutes. But I'll take it, and I would try and squeeze everything without that.
You are an excellent orator. Yes, you will come back. You're an excellent orator, and we know that you can squeeze a lot in 4 minutes.
So first of all, I mean, I am not happy with whatever visa-free that Ghanaians and South Africans started with, because at the moment you can really see what is happening over there. And Afrophobia, it is a cultural shame. It is written in our visa policies and enforced that our immigration does, that we should treat people by human rights, by making sure that they're taken care of once they cross the border. Now, at this point, I just don't want to talk about visas. I also want to talk about Africa having a borderless continent. The question is, have we unlocked the code, first of all? The colonial code. Almost every African country, it's sandwiched with either Anglophone or Francophone, with Anglophone in the middle. And it's very difficult to trade with people. either you're dealing with them, language barrier. There's so many issues that we haven't considered as how we're going to set up the trading platforms. And any trading platform definitely needs an industrial sovereignty or industrial platform to support the trading platform. We, first of all, don't have that. Secondly, I think that, you know, do we picture ourselves shipping all these goods that Africa decides to trade among Africans by using just road transport? I mean, you're talking of millions of transports just to transport the goods. So I am saying that, first of all, we need to build some sort of coastal transportation. I mean, the whole of West Africa, the only ship that docks, it's coming from either Barcelona or China that still goes through Spain. And then it just drops here at one of our harbors and then distributes to the whole Ghana. Whereas we need to build these coastal borders, this coastal distribution that would distribute the most goods. There are no goods that you can distribute by land more so than by water or by train. So first of all, we're doing the wrong things. Everybody's talking and this and that. Okay, fine. You've all been to great universities, great ideas, but the solution is what we need. And I don't think, you know, a borderless continent will ever happen if we don't start improvising some sort of coastal borders on our water bodies, connecting the water, the coastal borders across West Africa and connecting to East and other places. That's the one thing. Now let's talk about flying from another country to Ghana or to Nigeria. Somebody coming from Gambia to Ghana costs more than them flying to US. I mean, what makes you think that if you give them visa free, they're going to come and visit your country? When just the transportation cost is way too much. And then when they get to your country, you don't even have the platforms to host them, you know, affordable platforms to host them. So why wouldn't they want to rather cross border to the Eastern Europe or Western Europe or Asia or somewhere else in the world? My point is, you know, if Africans are ready to make this change, then they should take the decisions to build this. First of all, we have a complete political instability that has created a lot of bureaucracies. So you can't cross the borders and you can't put the same transport that is transporting goods for hundreds of thousands of people and have a private car in the middle and everybody, all of us trying to cross one border.
Kwame, let me ask you a question. Kwame,
please,
since you are one of Ghana's foremost entrepreneurs and you believe in this whole Pan-African movement for unification and the rest of it, you talk about when you come to Ghana, when people come to Ghana, or when they travel to another country, when they get there, we don't have the stuff to host them. You have at least 2 or 3 hotels here in Accra. How do we ensure that your hotels are even affordable for the ordinary African who is traveling here just for a visit? Because I think the other thing is that, and we've seen that particularly in the real estate business, where we seem to cater not necessarily for the ordinary African who may want to take advantage of a visa-free or a single air transport market to travel. So how do we ensure that entrepreneurs and real estate developers like yourself can help make it easier for the African who is able to travel to another African country and then they can afford even a hotel? And I think what the mayor may also have a question for you. Yeah.
Got disconnected.
I got disconnected. Is he right?
Yes. Shall we hear you?
He got disconnected. I can't hear him.
Sorry.
Please,
can I get to answer your question now?
Yes.
Well, so first of all, yes, you're right. I mean, talking about entrepreneurs building, you know, hotels that could be affordable for people who are coming into our country. See, the reason is this, Gabby. The people who can enjoy these privileges are people who are above middle class. And these people might be coming from Europe, America. You know, presidents are flying planes and they're flying private planes. Ministers are flying planes. They don't understand the pain of the average person. Now, if you open your border, you're saying that the average person should walk through. And that's when you're going to face the consequences of these issues of the masses drooping through the borders. That's the affordability that I'm talking about. Do we have that integrated development that can socially host them? No. That's my point that I'm making. Now, we shouldn't expect just the private sector to be the one that will resolve this issue. It would take the government partnering with the private sector to be able to do this. Now, let's take, for instance, if we decided to build coastal borders across West Africa, it wouldn't be the government and it wouldn't be the private sector unless the two have to come together. And they have to have some sort of industrial power to be able to execute that. Now, if we want to go this way, yes, we can give ourselves 40 years and Agenda 63, whatever you may call it at this point. But if we don't have industrial power, there is no country in this world that has been industrialized, that has been urbanized if they were not industrialized. We need to go through that process. Now, we're still going through the borders of our colonial masters. These borders were built by colonial masters 200 years ago. 200 years down the line, that's the same borders that we're using. That's the same thing. Now, if we want any change, we should start building our own. It should be controlled by us. It should be built by us. We should know how. We started that from scratch, and our people should have the skill set as well, to be able to control our bodies, to be able to control our production, so we have continental exportation that would create Africa's economic, stability for all Africans. I mean, we don't need to speak the same language to trade amongst ourselves. We can speak different languages, but as long as the infrastructure is there, somebody can bring 2 tons of cocoa from Ivory Coast to Ghana, and then somebody will be taking the chocolate when it's manufactured back to Nigeria or back to India. Now, to say that you're going to bring the same 2 or 3 tons of cocoa from Ivory Coast to Ghana by road, you're talking of 3 days. If people were even taking coach buses to say that they're coming to Ghana and they're coming for excursion, or they're going to Nigeria and they're going for tourism, whatever it is, to our borders, it would take them 3 or 4 days. So I am not against the fact that we need a borderless continent, right? But I'm against the fact that we're not preparing the basic foundation before we use words to implement that idea. That is the problem.
Right.
So we've been promised by many things, but the implementation has not benefited us because it's still something that is written. It's a manifesto that hasn't been manifested. Right. And I'm standing here today that it's AU Day saying that, look, we don't have any problems with the institutions, whether it's AU, ECOWAS, and whether they stand for our economy or they stand for our human rights or development. Like, look, let's make sure that we have built the foundation of what we're talking about. Let's make sure that there are either borders or integrations that is sustainable enough for people to cross through. Let's make sure the country has enough power to create services and jobs for people so they can do cross-border movements. If we don't do that, and we still fight for a borderless continent, it's going to be as chaotic as our educational system.
Thank you, Kwame. Thank you, Kwame. We'll come back to you, but I think you've spoken for a lot of entrepreneurs. You've spoken for a lot of people who are frustrated by the obstacles that, whether they were imposed on us by the colonial masters or were imposed on us by ourselves. So thank you. I think we'll go to Madam Zuma.
Madam Zuma,
who has something else.
Madam Zuma, are you on?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yes,
Thanks.
Please, let's hear what you have to say to all this.
Okay. Thanks to all the speakers. I just wanted to clarify something. As Zimbabweans in SADC.
Yeah, Madam Zuma, could you please turn on your camera, please, for us?
Okay, where is it?
Yes, wonderful. We have you on now. Yes, please continue.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that within SADC, only the DRC needs a visa to come to South Africa. None of the other countries need a visa. They get it on arrival for 90 days. So if people come illegally, it's not because they could not get a visa. At some stage, when there were a lot of Zimbabweans coming here illegally, When I checked with them when I was Minister of Home Affairs, why are they coming illegally when they don't need a visa? They get it on arrival for at least 90 days. They said their government wasn't issuing them with passports. So we had to have a joint committee between Zimbabwe and South Africa. And it turned out it was the time when Zimbabwe was going through a lot of economic difficulties. They didn't have paper to do their passports. So we had to give them paper so that they can be able to print passports for their citizens to come legally. I just wanted to clarify that because it's not true that they need a visa before. They get a visa on arrival if they have a valid passport. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay,
It's only
that makes sense. That makes sense. It clarifies the multilateral and bilateral agreements, on free movement that we're talking about. So apparently, Zimbabwe has the same agreement that West Africa has with South Africa, and so it does make sense. And so they were going through a lot of economic difficulties. They couldn't print passports, and so they were crossing the border illegally. So that does make sense.
Madam, we'll come back to you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much.
I think your perspective is very important, but I think are we going to Joy now?
Yes, we go to Joy. Yes. Hi, Dr. Joy Kategekwa, are you around?
Yes, I am.
Yes, we'd like to have a contribution from you for this particular thing that we're talking about, integration and visa-free. We know that you do have a presentation to make, but if you could contribute before we go to that part.
Thank you very much, Prince. I think I'd rather bundle them and really talk about where we go on this question of a visa-free Africa. Today's Africa Day, so happy Africa Day to everybody. And it's interesting, the theme for this year is water. And when you think about water, one of its most illuminating characteristics for the conversation we're having today is that water requires no passport. Water moves, water connects us, water nourishes us, water powers our industry, water powers the actualization of our dreams. So when we go back to the fact that water has no passport, we have to think about what current that gives us today. And I think the current it should give us today is really building this resolve for a visa-free Africa. When the African Development Bank Group started out with the Africa Visa Openness Index, this great report that we produced together with the African Union Commission, and Commissioner Ama was talking also about it earlier, at the start of that time, you had the percentage of travel for Africans within Africa that's visa-free was 20%. Now we're talking about 28.2%. It's not as far as we want to go, but it is progress nonetheless. You're also talking about a situation where 20% of African travel can get visa on arrival. In fact, the point that Dr. Dlamini Zuma was explaining right now, and then 51% of Africans require e-visas. So giving you these numbers just to say something is shifting. We also talked about what Togo did last week, the phenomenal decision of the president for all Africans to enter visa-free. We know what Ghana is doing. Uganda had some announcements at the start of this year. So it's not all gloom, but we need to move faster. And I think we will win this on the arguments, on the economic case. So I was looking at the numbers today. What happens to countries that have a visa-free regime for Africans? So when you think about Rwanda, Benin, Gambia, Kenya, for example. So in the case of Kenya, I was looking at the numbers. In 2025 alone, they got 3.8 billion out of tourism. They got about 7.9 million visitors, of which 5.2 million were from other African countries. So intra-African mobility. When you think about what Rwanda's open dispensation for a visa-free policy has done to the economy, I think the numbers talk about $680 million in 2025 out of just tourism. But when you think about tourism, it's just the magnet that brings everything else in terms of the converging sectors around that. So conference tourism, what it's done for the airline and that sort of thing. And then Gambia, they had about 230 100,000 visitors coming into Gambia because of its visa-free dispensation. The point to make is that there is an economic case, there are economic gains to be emphasized for a visa-free sort of dispensation. But countries are also contending with important issues, and I think understanding what that is will be critical, especially because even as they experiment in the regional economic communities, where typically you have a rights-based approach to movement. So in EAC, where I come from, I can enter Kenya, I can enter Tanzania, Rwanda as a rights issue. I can enter, stay, establish, reside. Same situation with ECOWAS. But what happens when you're trying to bring the recs together, connect, interact? Where does the trust fall? We need to understand what that is and work with countries to fill those gaps. This is the kind of thinking we're doing. This is the kind of analysis we're doing this year, together with the African Union Commission, to understand what that is. But in terms of the African Development Bank Group, we see that some of our instruments can be useful also in incentivizing governments to take these processes forward. So, for example, what we call the policy-based operations. This is the sorts of resources that are made available to countries not attached to any project, but attached to a policy agenda. Perhaps more can be done in that direction. We also have financing in grant form that helps what we call regional public goods, investing in those big ideas that connect Africa, those big investments that connect Africa, policy harmonization, etc. This is how we work with the AFCFTA Secretariat or the REX. The final point, of course, is the big investments we have in regional projects themselves, regional operations, creating the infrastructure of connectivity. Let me close off by talking about this idea that we cannot dream integration and we cannot actualize integration in a dispensation where the African is kept out. The dreams of Africans should be actualized across the single market. So we can take a step approach, for example, where we think about movement for purposes of supplying services is facilitated, as is the case with the protocol on trade in services of the AFCFTA. We can also think about what kind of movement is linked to the production, the transportation, the trade facilitation of goods, and think about that as well. And then finally, we should also experiment with this idea of an Africa zone. We talked about Erasmus earlier. In ESC, we used to have similar programs. They weren't called Erasmus, but this idea of connecting people, especially at university level education, we can test that out. But maybe what we need right now is a coalition of those countries that see the benefit so that they can start to exchange. We track the economic progress that's coming from that so that it's a show and tell kind of situation, that the economic benefits are incentivizing others to join. From our part at the African Development Bank Group, this is something we're committed to. We've produced the Africa Visa Openness Index for 10 years together with the African Union Commission, and we will continue to do that to keep the pulse, but more so to get the infrastructure ready, investing in the enablers that the gentleman was talking about, so that the foundation is ready for wealth creation, for prosperity, for jobs, and for seizing opportunities, regional opportunities, even from a country dispensation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joy. Dr. Joy Kategekwa, Director of the African Development Bank's Regional Integration and Coordination Office, has been leading the charge on the Africa Visa Openness Index report. And she's been doing a lot of behind-the-scenes work to make visa-free a reality through evidence-based research. And she mentioned that Rwanda has registered over $500 million in 2025 alone from intra-African visits. This is impressive. And then the Gambia, 230,000 visitors from across the continent visiting Gambia. So that is a case for visa-free across the continent. Now, shall we have two videos, one from Dangote complaining about how difficult it is for him to gain access to 35 countries, and then there is Rabiu as well, and then after that we're going to have a clip from Togo.
At least you can come here visa-free.
No, here is the best example, but I told him that, yes, as an investor, as somebody who really wants to make Africa great, I have to now apply 35 different visas on my passport. And I told Mr. President, I said, Mr. President, I really don't have the time to go and be dropping my passports in embassies to get a visa. But you see, the most annoying thing is that, yes, if you are treating everybody the same, then I can understand. You know, I can assure you, Patrick doesn't need 35 visas. No, I said that. What I'm saying, you have...
You don't need 35 visas on a French passport compared to a Nigerian passport.
35 visas on French passport.
No.
But, you know, so which means you have a freer movement than myself in Africa.
Yeah. But you have, I remember that there are 3 countries, Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda. You have 1 visa for the free when you are a tourist.
This is true.
I've done it. So it's good. So you can expand it. It's a question of will. But I think all what is moving on about community between Africa, it's up the African leaders to decide, will be good for Africa.
Yes, but it will change. And what I keep saying...
Some about free trade movement of people in Africa. Last year, February 2025, I was traveling to Cape Town for the mining endeavor in South Africa. And as we landed, and it was a red eye, so I left at night from Lagos to Cape Town. We arrived at 6 in the morning, and as we arrived, we went to the immigration, attended my passport. The immigration officer looked at it, and he was like, "Why is your visa?" And I said, "My visa is there." Unknown to me, my visa had expired the day before. Unfortunately, our crew did not check the visas to ensure that the visas were valid. We were there for 4 hours, but at the end of the day, I had to turn back to Lagos. But the issue is, while we were waiting, there were like 3 international flights from Europe. All the 3 flights were mostly Europeans. I was standing there by the immigration desk, and each and every passenger on those 3 flights went into Cape Town without any visa at all. I do not have a problem with the fact that I was there without a visa and I was returned. I took full responsibility for that. I had an issue being an African in Africa, being turned away because I do not have a visa, and foreigners from other continents were allowed to enter without a visa. This must change.
J'ai la conviction que par cette décision, d'autres pays suivront la marche pour que désormais, en allant au Kenya, en Éthiopie, en Afrique du Sud, en Égypte, au Nigeria, partout ailleurs en Afrique, quand on est ressortissant de ce continent, que nous n'ayons pas besoin de cette formalité.
So you heard 3 people, Dangote and Rubio, Africa's top billionaires, Africa's top industrialists, Africa's top investors, not having easy access to other African countries. And it's absurd because you have backpackers from other continents having access to more countries in Africa than our own billionaires who are ready to invest in our continent. You know, so that's the absurdity of it. And then we had the Togolese Minister of Economy, who said, "I am convinced that through this decision," that is, Togo has now established a visa-free regime for all Africans. And after the establishment of that visa-free regime announced on the 18th of May, he said, that is the Minister of Economy, that "I am convinced that through this decision, other countries will follow suit, so that from now on, when traveling to Kenya, Ethiopia, Egypt, South Africa, Nigeria, and everywhere else in Africa, those of us who are citizens of this continent will no longer need this formality." Gabby.
Well, I think we celebrate Togo. We also should celebrate Ghana, but not as much as we had anticipated. And I say so because the Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2024, on that platform, the President of the Republic promised to give Ghanaians a visa-free travel for all Africans coming to Ghana. We welcomed it because it helps with tourism, business tourism, and it helps this whole movement of realizing the African
and cultural integration.
Absolutely. We had executive approval, and even then I must say that we lobbied for it because the promise was that before the end of the year Ghana was going to have visa-free for all Africans traveling to Ghana. So we lobbied for it, and we made sure that because he said in his words, I want to do this before my term is over, we pushed. And I was quite excited that on 18th December, it was given executive approval, and it was supposed to be visa-free for all Africans traveling to Ghana. Subsequently, I mean, I've engaged with the current president, and because it's also Pan-Africanist, we were quite excited about what we thought was going to happen today. And to quote from the president, and this is good news, but not the perfect news that we expected. It's good news. The president said this morning at Kempinski, when he launched the new visa regime, he said, effective immediately, all holders of African passports traveling to Ghana for business or tourism will apply for visas exclusively via the new online e-visa platform, and they will pay no visa fee. This is President George.
No visa fee, that is.
No visa fee, yeah, no visa fee. It is good news because it costs maybe about $100 or so to apply for a visa. $200. Yes, $200 if you arrive without a visa. You know, but it's also not what we expected, because we're expecting that it will be a visa free for Africans traveling to Africa. Let's get comments from Wodemel.
I wanted to ask, does this affect countries that already has a bilateral relationship with Ghana?
Oh, well, if you have bilateral, then that bilateral stands.
I'm sure about it.
Yeah, the bilateral stands. But
so
yeah.
it means that like each and every African that is coming to Ghana has to apply online. What about like countries that we have the relationship with?
Okay, so let me explain.
No, don't explain because you and I don't know. We can't explain because we haven't looked at the details.
Okay.
But what we would expect is that if there's already a bilateral that you don't need to apply for visa, that should apply.
Yeah.
You know, because this one is really is you get a visa, but you have to apply.
Yeah.
And then I hear they're talking about it shouldn't take more than 48 hours, which itself is good news. I mean, it will boost tourism, and especially those in America where sometimes you have to travel from another American state to Washington or New York in order to apply for visa. This is
it resolves that problem.
Yes, but the challenge, and that, so I think the e-visa is not just for Africans. I suppose it's for everybody who's applying.
The only difference being Africans don't pay.
You don't pay. Africans don't pay. But let's get your comments on that.
I am yet to
read the details.
Yeah. But I have been champion visa-free or borderless Africa for a very long time. And I feel like Ghana not being visa-free, but rather free visa, I feel like, at least for me, if you ask me, it's a step in the right direction. But I think also it's because a lot of people literally push back when Ghana decided to announce visa free. People were complaining about their safety, people coming into the country. So they decided to probably decided to do a background check. That's why they're saying that you have to apply. But I think this should not last for the year. I think for now, maybe we can just test run it and see how best it can go. But I believe that it's about time. An African doesn't need to apply for visa before he comes to Africa.
But Wodemel, I don't know whether any of our panelists wants to come in on this. But Wodemel, the thing is that Ghanaians actually even forget that we have free movement for Nigerians, for Ivorians, for Senegalese.
And this has been the case since 1979.
No, absolutely. For West Africa, for all the countries in West Africa.
There is...
So what's the fear?
No, there is...
And it hasn't led to an influx.
It's just misinformation. A lot of people are not really educated when it comes to visa-free, borderless Africa. People don't understand it. I mean, the moment the president announced that on the 25th, which is today, we're gonna everyone coming to Ghana are gonna be visa free. Everyone was literally complaining about Nigerians, and I'm like, but did you know that Nigerians have access to Ghana since 1900s?
Since the 1979 ECOWAS protocol.
Yes. You see, so I think for the whole,
and we haven't seen an influx of Nigerians here.
No, not at all.
I mean, there are Nigerians here, but it's not the sort of influx. And when you look at the numbers are not even higher than what they were in 1969 to 1970 when we had this Aliens Compliance Act. And yes, so we are not seeing any sort of surge in Nigerians, Ivorians, Senegalese, Gambians coming into Ghana or to the other countries since we had this ECOWAS protocol. So it tells us that it really only facilitates free movement. It doesn't lead to influx.
And listen, $680 million in 2025 from intra-African visit to Rwanda. You know, it's a case. And it's a good case.
For me, I think a lot of Africans need to be educated.
Yes. Dr. Joy, would you like to come on? All right.
No, I'm enjoying listening.
Okay, Wadimaya can go on.
I think one thing that I would love to suggest to everyone on this platform, I have seen that literally there are so many groups that fighting for one common goal. But the biggest solution that we're all avoiding is education. We need to start educating Africans about what borderless Africa means. That's why I spend most of my time trying to educate people, because the moment you talk about borderless Africa, everybody will be like, we don't want Nigerians in our country, we don't want these people in our country. But I'm like, there are countries that you don't even need visas to go to. So I think it's about time for us to spend much more time educating Africans about what a borderless movement is and what does it imply. Because listen, 90% of Africans don't understand what borderless Africa is all about. If you don't start experiencing it, like the challenges of traveling from one country to another, I don't think you will even care about what a borderless Africa is.
And you know what Commissioner Amma said? She said that a borderless Africa is both necessary and achievable. And I use the example of Rwanda. Rwanda was the first country, I believe, that signed the Free Movement Protocol. It offers visa-free travel to all Africans. It doesn't mean that it has compromised the security of Rwanda. In fact, when you are leaving Rwanda, the country, you get out of your vehicle, okay, before you get to the airport, and you go through a scanning system with dogs. So they are security conscious, but then they still allow you to come in, and they track you when you are in town because they have your visa details, you have your passport details. You know, so I think really it doesn't mean it compromises security. I don't know whether we have Ziad or anybody.
We do have Amin who has another presentation to make. Amin, are you ready with your presentation on visa-free?
May I say something?
Okay, I mean, before you come in, let's hear. Before you come in,
to speak first.
Before you come in, let's hear from Mama Zuma.
Right, because when I sometimes talk to people about a borderless Africa, they think a borderless Africa means people can walk into the country without going through the ports of entry. There is some misunderstanding amongst other people that, oh, a borderless Africa, you mean people can just walk in from any part of the country, not through the official ports of entry. I think that education is necessary to explain. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Her Excellency, Madam Zuma. Shall we go to Amin Idris Adum for your presentation? And please make it snappy because we've got only a few minutes to go, and we will also like to hear from Ziad and a few other contributors.
All right, thank you very much. When we speak about, of course, visa in Africa, I think when we speak about borderless in Africa, I think the first thing that come is always how can we move without visa, and that's very much understandable, I would say. But visa openness is visible. It's easy to measure, as actually Dr. Joy put it. It creates as well political signal, and it does matter. If Africans, we cannot enter another African country, I think that integration is already blocked at the door. And we are happy to see that more and more countries are actually moving toward that. But my argument here is that the visa is only the first layer. Because the real question is, what happened after entry? Can you work? That's the first question. Can you register a business? Can you open a bank account? Can you buy property? Can your children go to school? Can your degree be recognized? And can you belong to the country? So I really want us to look beyond that. We need to ask whether African integration is creating only mobility or whether it is actually creating what we call right of establishment. Because entry without opportunity for me is not integration. It's what we call a controlled access. And so we have our integration paradox. And the integration paradox is this one. Some countries are becoming more and more, I would say, open on residency. Africans can enter more easily. They can stay more easily. On paper, that looks actually progress. But several of those same countries still restrict entrepreneurship once people are inside. So the doors open, but the economy actually remains closed. And that creates a two-tier integration system. Tier 1, you may enter. Tier 2, you may build a life. Most of our systems actually are still stuck in Tier 1. That's why visa openness can be misleading somehow because it measures access to territory. It does not actually measure access to opportunity. And a continent where a continent can be visa open, but still economically exclusionary, I would say. So the real integration question is not only can African cross borders, the real question is once they cross, can they participate? And let me give you a few examples. There is what I call the entrepreneur's wall. Entrepreneurship is where this contradiction really become very sharp. Many African countries formally allow foreign nationals to own companies, but the barriers appear at the level of small business, informal enterprise, and local service. And that matters because most migrants do not arrive with millions of dollars. They start with small businesses, a shop, a salon, a taxi, a barbershop, a small trading activity, a food business, a repair service. Those are the entry points in economic life. But in many countries, those sectors are reserved for nationals only or restricted through licensing rules, local ownership requirements, minimum capital requirements, or sector-specific prohibition. Take Ghana. Ghana is a very good example. Ghana say, I open my border, but Ghana don't allow any African national to open a small shop or to have a taxi, or to have a barber shop, or to even have a bar. And by the way, if you want to open a taxi company, you need first to have 25 taxi car. You know, the result is absurd. In some cases, a foreign African investors may be allowed to open large company, but not a small neighborhood business. This is not economic sovereignty. I would say this is really fragmented exclusion. So we welcome the millionaires and the billionaires, but we don't want to welcome normal people. So if we want regional value chain, cross-border investments, and people-led integration, I think then small entrepreneurs must be treated as integration actors, not as threats. This is what we see with many countries today. Then you have the labor barrier as well, because employment is one of them. A person may enter legally, they may even reside legally, by the way, but to work, they face another actually system: permits, employer sponsorship, labor market test, closed sector, and administrative discretion. So labor market, I can understand, can be particularly important. They require an employer to prove that no candidates are available before hiring a foreign worker. But you make things much easier actually for Europeans coming to work in our countries. In many African countries, you have as well another actually case about the property. Property is another layer. In several countries, foreign nationals will face restriction on land ownership, especially agricultural land. South Africa is one of the countries that allow actually agricultural land ownership under some conditions. But you to go to West Africa, Ghana don't allow it, Cote d'Ivoire don't allow it, Benin don't allow it, Togo don't allow it. That's actually quite difficult. Banking is another layer, I would say. If money legally or comply with foreign exchange rules, they remain economically marginal and excluded. So there are many African countries where actually moving money is absolutely problematic actually for them. So let me conclude by saying that the conclusion for me is simple. We don't just need visa harmonization. What we need is establishment right. We need free trade without, I think that free trade without free movement is incomplete. Goods, by the way, goods cannot be more African than our people, because you want to move goods. Free movement without human rights is horrible. It was African to enter, but not actually to build. What we need is a binding continental architecture and that national enjoy it.
You're breaking up really badly. And for that matter,
to open it.
You're really breaking badly. So, but we have really understood the crux of what you're trying to say here. And we will go to Dr. Josephine Ochodako to complete what you're saying. Really, the Make Africa Borderless now.
It's important to recognize that. It's important to recognize that Amin was making a very useful point, but our digital pathway is yet to be a highway. That is why we're having internet issues with them. We should find.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm back.
Yes. So if you can within a minute or so conclude, I think that'll be useful. But it tells you that we need to fix our digital highway on the continent. Please continue. Just within a minute, if you can wind up, please.
Yeah. Just quickly, I would say I was actually saying that we really need to have the right to work, the right to start a business, the right to open a bank account, and all those right. And that's the next frontier. So I want to leave you with 3 questions. First, what minimum rights should every African have in every African country? And that's important. You need to respond to answer the question. And the second one, which barrier should we tackle first? Business barrier, labor, property, finance, services, and third, who drives this? Is it the AU, the REX, the member states, private sector, all of us actually together? Because the goal is not harmonization for its own sake. The goal is integration, and not just the right to enter, but the right really to belong to any African country. I will conclude by saying that when I joined AU, like 11 years ago, we were having a commission meeting in which we were speaking about diaspora. And at that day, I was speaking about African diaspora. In my mind that day, I would say African diaspora, it was like a Ghanaian living in South Africa is African diaspora. And Her Excellency, Madam Zuma, stopped me immediately. She said, what are you talking about? African diaspora are African people living outside Africa. When they live in Africa, they are in their home country. They are not diaspora. And we need to translate that into reality, into our policies, into the everyday life, actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Amin. I think you made a useful point. In Ghana, our Ghana Investment Promotion Center Act actually limits the retail business to Ghanaians at some level. Okay? Even though we've signed the ECOWAS protocol, okay, we say that this business is just for Ghanaians. So if you're from Togo, if you're from Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, even though we say that you can do business in our country, once you open the shop, you have Guta protesting against you. It happens here in Ghana. Let's even look at our constitution. Our constitution, Article 266 of our constitution, actually prohibits a foreigner from owning property freehold. Even Ghanaians, you may say you have a leasehold of 99, but for a foreigner, you can only have a leasehold to 50 years. And that foreigner is not just for someone who is outside of the continent, Africa. Someone from Cote d'Ivoire, if they want to invest in our property market in Ghana, they cannot own that property for more than 50 years. Do we know how that works against investments?
It's not attractive for investors.
It's not attractive at all. I can tell you that some years back, I engaged myself and a few people engaged some of the big developers in UAE, Imar, about them coming to Ghana to invest and build apartments and offices. They seemed quite excited. But when they realized that you can only get leasehold up to 50 years, they were no longer interested, because they say that their market will not just be Ghanaians, but it will be for investors everywhere who want to own lands across the world.
And we're dealing with patient capital over here.
And if they can't transfer it to their children, their children's children, it doesn't make sense to them. So really, let's not just look at South Africa. Let's look across the continent and the laws that basically restrict other Africans from doing business in our countries. And I think that's important.
Yes.
And I think in order for these laws to be changed, the African must be educated that an African is not a foreigner in Africa. So
absolutely,
I think people need to start understanding, because I was so surprised when I went to Cote d'Ivoire and they were speaking my language. I went to Togo and they were speaking my language. Literally,
you go to Burkina, they're speaking your language as well.
And I didn't even know what came from there. Right? So unless you travel just to get to see that these borders were intentionally created to keep an African in their circle. I mean, look at how Ghana was created. I mean, look at the borders. All the people around Ghana literally speaks French.
You talk about wache coming from somewhere else. You know the staple food of Jamaica? Rice and peas. Is actually wache. Anyway, I think the key thing is also, the biggest problem facing our continent now is about youth unemployment. Okay? And we have graduates who have their degrees, but can they, if there are job opportunities on the other parts of the continent, can they go and apply with the certificate that they have acquired in their respective countries?
And sometimes Westerners have better opportunities.
Please come in. Maybe you should bring in the next.
To these opportunities than Africans themselves. And this is why the Make Africa Borderless Now manifesto number 6 says unlocking African talent through mutual skills recognition. And on this note, we will bring in Dr. Josephine Ochodaku, who's a Ghanaian-born medical doctor practicing in South Africa. She's lived there for quite some time and has quite a good understanding of West African doctors practicing in South Africa. Now, the question is, are their qualifications automatically recognized, or do they have to undergo some additional examinations and layers of verification before being licensed? Are their skills mutually recognized in South Africa? Dr. Josephine Ochodaku.
Thank you very much, and I really hope that you can hear me.
We can, yes.
Because I was having some issues. Thank you very much for the question. So maybe let's tackle with the first part, which is, are we recognized, or are West African qualifications recognized in the South African context? The answer to that is not automatically. There are, as similar to other countries, a few processes that need to be undertaken. And this is usually undertaken by the Health Professional Council of South Africa, known as HPCSA, who will kind of assess the legitimacy of the qualification first of all, and they use processes or systems such as the ECFMG, which is an educational commission for foreign medical graduates system that has to verify the authenticity of the qualification, or where the school that the qualification is coming from has to be legitimized. So that process alone can take up to a minimum of 3 months. In my experience, I know of a couple of foreign medical doctors that have had to sit for the board exams, and to actually get space in writing the board exam takes a few months. And some doctors have to essentially wait up to 6 months or more, depending on the university's responsiveness, to get their qualification recognized and to start working in South Africa. So that, obviously, yes, it is, if you want to look at it in a way of avoiding risks, is, a way to approach standardization. However, it is stringent, and I think with this free movement, it's not only just a visa free, as some of the speakers have mentioned, but also establishment. Where are we to allow such qualifications to be standardized and to be accepted?
I understand.
Yes,
it's
thank
the
you.
same.
Over to you.
I understand it's the same situation in Ghana, but I have a follow-up question for you. Is it the same for professionals who have studied in European and American universities?
Right. Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question. And the answer to that is, in practice, mostly not. And I'll say this because there are some universities that are pre-approved on the list for HPCSA, as opposed to some African universities. And I would even give an example of the Cuba South African agreement. And this kind of goes to what I would propose for this free movement establishment, in the sense that when there is a bilateral agreement, a lot of the times, there's a disregard of any form of authentication or anything like that. Because as we speak now, I can attest to the fact that Cuban doctors are able to work in the South African context and vice versa. And actually, even some students do relocate to Cuba or are allowed to go to Cuba to finish or complete their medical degree and work here when they are done with that qualification. So a lot of times it's not so much about what the preference is, but also what the bilateral agreements are. And perhaps that's one approach that we could use when coupled with this free movement strategy or approach. Over.
Can I say something?
Oh, of course, I was going to come to you because you were behind the desk with your pen on this Cuban policy.
Mm-hmm. When I wanted Cuban doctors to come and help us in the 90s when I was Minister of Health, the same body that is stringent to you, they said no, they don't want Cuban doctors. I said to them, give me 10 professors of your choice. I'll go with them to Cuba. When we come back, they should tell me why we can't have Cuban doctors. So I took 10 professors of their choice to Cuba. They looked at the curriculum, they looked at the health system, they looked at everything and came back, and they couldn't say we shouldn't have Cuban doctors. Even when they said that we can have Cuban doctors, they said no, they must be interviewed in Cuba by South African professors before they're allowed to come to South Africa. I then said to the Cubans, I'm very sorry about this, but Fidel, president of Cuba, said, we want to help you. Let them interview them. And they were interviewed before they could get onto the plane and come to South Africa to work. So that's how it all started. We then also sent students to Cuba to study. But before they can work in South Africa, having studied in Cuba, they have to do time in our own university. So I just wanted to clarify that it's not like it was just agreed. There was a long process that had to be undertaken.
Right.
I'm not saying it's okay, but I'm just putting facts. Thank you.
Oh, but you bring context to this, Mama Zuma. The fact that we are talking about, Cuba is very important to African integration because Cuba is part of the wider global African network, which obviously is part of the 6th region of Africa. Yes, Gabby.
Can I ask a question? Is Josephine still on?
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Josephine, you are a professional in South Africa. when you see how South Africa is being portrayed internationally, do you think it reflects the South Africa you know?
Oh, yeah, interesting. Thank you. And I hope you guys can still hear me. Yeah, good question. So, it's a bit of a difficult question, but the answer is no. You know what? I would say that the situation that South Africa is finding themselves in has got obviously a lot of difficult circumstances around it. And I would say that the average South African does not necessarily have, xenophobia at heart or have discrimination at heart, but certain circumstances and certain situations that they find themselves in are putting them in such realities. However, I would say that these kind of platforms and these kind of conversations bring a light what some of the circumstances are, so that we are able to see the root causes or the situation that everybody's finding themselves in, so that we are able to tackle those scenarios and situations that we're finding ourselves in. But I would really say that yes, there is an element to it, but there will be some context that has to come around it. That's my honest opinion.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Josephine Oshidaku. We'll now move to another representative of the African Union, who is sitting in for Ambassador Ama Chum. He is Dr. Ahmed Zanya Bugre, Senior Advisor on Free Movement to Her Excellency's office. And so the question is, the AU Free Movement Protocol has only 4 ratifications in 8 years. What specific political or diplomatic barriers are you encountering at the level of member states, and what creative strategies is the African Union deploying to move beyond the moral suasion towards binding commitment? If you're around, Dr. Ahmed Zanya Bugre.
My apologies. I was taken off and just brought back on. Are you hearing me?
We can hear you quite clearly. Could you please show yourself on camera? Thank you very much. Yes, we can see you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Excellencies. Good afternoon, Her Excellency, Madam Zuma. Nice to see you. And to everyone and dear colleagues and Ghanaians, fellow citizens. Thank you so much. My name is Ahmed Bugri, and I am the Senior Advisor to Her Excellency, the Commissioner on Free Movement of Persons. It is important as we discuss about the Free Movement Protocol to understand that these rights are enshrined rights as human rights. There has been a judgment of the African Court and the African Commission's opinion that the right to enter and the right to reside in a country are 2 sides of the same coin. And this case came up when a refugee was allowed to enter, a Sudanese refugee was allowed to enter a country but not allowed to establish. And the European Commission on Human Rights in Banjul emphasized that for every African, the right of the freedom to move from your country and to enter another country is not only a right enshrined in the African Charter, but it is something that member states must take all steps to guarantee. And so the question is, why do member states then find it hesitant, in not ratifying the Free Movement Protocol, but overwhelmingly ratifying the ACFTA, the Agreement on the Africa Free Continental Agreement? And by the way, these protocols were brought to the Assembly on the same day, in January 2019. But within 1 year, the ACFTA was ratified, and the ACFTA was, the Free Movement Protocol was not. And we attribute that to a number of challenges that the member states have shown that they are facing. One is security. That has always been the top, especially in light of increasing cross-border crimes and also, terrorism. And so security tops the list. And I think that I hear Budimaya also say that most of what is being said is also misunderstanding by member states. Of course, you cannot undermine what member states say that they are challenging, and therefore we have to listen. The second thing that we also have realized is border infrastructures. The African Union, especially Her Excellency's department, has taken a number of border assessments, and we have realized that in some cases, let's say the Aflao-Togo border, not only are there language barriers, as was mentioned by the colleague earlier, by Amin earlier, but also the infrastructure. You have two systems that do not communicate with one another, and therefore, whether it is used by border agents to charge local people money or whatever, but we see that there is no, that most countries are complaining that their infrastructure is not actually aligned. The third issue that we normally that member states talk about is the disparities, and we can see that play out in the South African situation, where you find people vocally saying, your countries are broken, go back and fix it. Whether that is a reality or not, it is not true. South Africa might be an advanced economy in Africa, but it is not the other countries, residents who are going to other countries, does not mean that their countries are broken. But we also have to agree that not all the countries are on the same par when it comes to economic growth or to trade and other stuff. So member states are saying that for the countries that are more advancing, and like Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria, Rwanda, and all other countries, they risk flooding the place. But as we were saying, that has been proven not to be true. Rwanda has opened its borders, and there hasn't been an influx because they are able to control their borders. And so these are some of the issues that we face when we meet with the member states in terms of ratification. But the most important issue is that I think it's also a question of education. We agree that for many people, borderless means there is no border, which is not. The term borderless means seamless borders, crossing borders. Not even the EU do not have borders. They have borders, but when you enter one border, then you are allowed to travel within the EU Schengen area without having to show your passport again. But your passport is shown in one place, and so there is a border. But the movement from within the place is seamless. And in our African situation, the right to enter is the right to enter through a port, either an airport or through a land border. So you need to, at some point, give in your travel document. And this is, again, where member states are saying that most of the countries in Africa have different ID systems, which do not, again, communicate to each other, which is linked up to the border management systems. But the argument that some of us or some people have always said is, if we are able to invest in terms of armaments, in terms of security apparatuses, why are we not able to also to invest the same amount of capacity in allowing people to move? But there is this misconception notion that they can be trade without mobility of persons. But that's not true. We have come to know that for us to be able to economically integrate, there must be socio-economic integration. Labor has to move, skill has to move, investment, entrepreneurship. I myself am a Ghanaian, and I'm born in the northern part of Ghana. I come from Boku, and probably Ghanaians, all of you know where Boku is because of the current issues that have been talked about in the media. Now, my grandmother is from Burkina, most of you who know Boku is a town where people are intermarried. And my grandmother comes from, from across the border from Warianga, which is in the Togolese side. So my maternal grandparents are Togolese, and my paternal grandparents in my mother's side are Burkina. I speak More quite well. So when I go to Burkina, people think I'm Burkina, I'm Burkinabe, I'm a Mampulshi, I'm a Ghanaian. So when you grow up in the cross-border area, my mother never had a passport. And when there are funerals across the river to go to Burkina for funerals or weddings, we do go, So mobility is happening on the continental level.
That's amazing.
But the issue is, so if you go to places like Boku, people do not have passports, but they farm across the river.
Can we have in 30 seconds, can we have your concluding remarks? And since you
yes, please.
You show that they are artificial borders and they didn't matter to your grandmother and they shouldn't matter to your grandson. I think that's what you're saying. But if you can have your concluding remarks,
Okay, so what we are doing, what the African Union Commission is doing at the moment is we just came back from Seychelles, where we had the first African Union organs and REX coordination mechanism, because we knew that to be able to drive a new message, there must be coordination at the wider level. So within the African Union itself, with private sector, with partners as well, and then with citizens. And so we have to have coordination. The first internal coordination mechanism has been formed between the AU Commission, the REX, and the organs. The next step is to have with member states and with the business community and with CSOs, so that the message that we have can be passed on to citizens that free movement of persons is not only beneficial for the prosperity of Africa itself, but it is mainly for the benefit of
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I think we still have Joy. Dr. Joy Katigeo?
Yes.
Yeah, Joy. Can we have your parting shots? Sounds a bit violent.
Thank you very much. This is a very illuminating conversation, precisely the sorts of conversations we should have on a day as important as Africa Day. And I'd like to leave us with 4 ideas, strategies, action points. The first one is we must keep the advocacy going. And I'm really excited that in 2 days, we're going to be here in Brazzaville, where together with the Africa Prosperity Network, we're going to be pushing on this question of Make Africa Borderless now, in terms of advancing the campaign. We need the signatures. Everybody on this call, tell a friend to sign the petition. So advocacy is key. The second one is we must implement the African Continental Free Trade Area. We often speak of it as an agreement that is only about goods, but in fact, it has a full protocol on trade and services, for which they've made clear commitments to open 5 key sectors. These sectors are finance, communication, transport, tourism, business services. In each of these is a right of entry for the purposes of supplying services. So from a strategic perspective, it makes sense to say where the AFCFTA is moving, let's ensure trade in services is also moving. The third thing I'd say is we must invest in building the confidence on the pain points countries face. If it's about security, if it's about the absence of information, if it's about building confidence, how do we create structured programs that can allow for countries to invest in that and build the confidence? Let's learn from Rwanda. Let's transfer that idea to other places. The final point I'd say is this Africa zone. We need to try it out, because the idea of 4 or 5 countries, if we focus on something where there's a visa regime where you get into one and go to all of them, and they're promoted almost like a Schengen zone. They're promoted in such a way that we're tracking what happens with tourism, what happens with business, what happens with industry, what happens with jobs, what happens with the quality of lives. Maybe it makes our case stronger that there is value to be got rather than fear to be perpetuated when you open your borders. So all systems go for pushing ahead on all fronts on this issue of a visa-free Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Joy. And you won't believe this. My religion is Arsenal. And because of you, I'm joining you in Brazzaville tomorrow. Because of that, I will miss Budapest. And I can't believe that I'm actually forgoing being at the Champions League final for Brazzaville, and it's because of the good cause. So thank you
and
very much.
PSG. So.
Oh yes, he will also be in Brazzaville. So thank you very much. I think we have Ziad on the line.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, please, can we have your parting shots as well?
Yes,
if you don't find out to be too violent.
Basically, Ziad, what we want to know is what lessons can ECOWAS teach the rest of Africa about the successes and failures of a sub-regional free movement protocol. You've been working on that, and professionally you work in that sector as well. So let's have your thoughts.
And from that we come to Wodemaya. Thanks.
Wodemaya, and then we go to freedom.
Yeah,
and then we close.
Can I say something at the end? Just 3 things.
Of course. Let's have Ziad first, and then you'll come in.
All right. I'll be short since we already said these are parting shots. Because the ECOWAS Free Movement Protocol offers a critical case study and a cautionary tale at the same time for the acceleration of ratification of the FMP of the African Union and the operationalization of the AFCFTA. On the positive side, ECOWAS has succeeded in establishing a progressive blueprint. And this takes us to the levels of free movement, because as I was mentioning earlier in my remarks when the discussion was really enlightening, there is the freedom of entry, and then there's the freedom of residence, and then there's the freedom of establishment. If you don't have the sensitization to your people about what these people are coming to do, then you'll always have resistance and a loss of buy-in from the economic operators and the populations whom you are supposed to be the policymaker of. And so your policies will never take up because people don't want that. And you'll not talk about it in public, but that will be the reality of it eternally. So the statistics that we have indicated that small-scale cross-border trade is not localized. Actually, women traders come from an average of 228 to 400 kilometers per journey, all the way to trade within border areas. So it's not the cross-border trade in the traditional sense of goods moving on their way to destination. It's actually people carrying their wares and services to sell and be done with it and come back. So I think this distinction is very important for us to understand, so that you will know what the problem is, so that we come with better solutions. Now, on the failure side, ECOWAS had no legal recourse for the micro traders. Up to today, there are no ways where you can solve a dispute or settle a dispute when you are a micro trader. And I hope that the AFCFTA, with its dispute resolution mechanism, will eventually fit in a complaint mechanism that will be accessible for the traders. And finally, the severe infrastructure gap, because if you don't have adequate infrastructures, then your trade will delay, your traders will suffer unnecessarily, and then it will impact negatively on the region and on the border communities. And lastly, but not least, the entrenched gender bias, which is most obvious at the border crossings. We need more sensitization to the border agencies, but eventually we also need a lot of sensitization for our communities at the borders, across the borders, but also within the countries, to sensitize them on the importance of cross-border movements, not just for the average citizen, but for the trader as well. So these will be my parting shots. I submit. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ziad Hamawi. Shall we now go to Amin Idris Adum for your parting shot? Is Amin still around?
Yes.
Yeah, please. You've got a minute. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, quickly. So 3 things from my side as well. Number one, I think it's important that we move really to guarantee minimum rights to work, to register business, to open bank account, access service, have qualifications. And that at least can be done within each regs. If ECOWAS citizens are moving freely, they should have the freedom of establishment. And the same, we can actually do it within SADC, ECAS, EAC, UMA, IGAD, etc. Then number 2 is really modernize border management, because that's really the elephant in the room. We have serious problem at the border. we need to scale one-stop border post. We have like actually 32 one-stop border posts, most of them in East Africa, only one in West Africa, which is not even working properly. And we need to have joint border controls, digital pre-clearance, biometric ID, and advanced passenger information systems that are harmonized to make actually border faster, safer, and less bureaucratic. So as I said, OSBP are already designed to reduce duplication, congestion, and delay. And that at least can be done as well within each REX to begin with, where we can actually work together, SADC, ECAS, EAC, ECOWAS, etc. And finally, I believe that it's important really to start thinking about investing in continental digital public infrastructure, REX and other NEPAD, with the support of African Development Bank, Afrexim Bank, and others. We can really work together to promote and support REX to build interoperable digital IDs, single windows, e-permit, digital authorization, and cross-border payment systems, but also trusted data sharing platform under the AU digital protocol and the ACFTA digital trade protocol. Those annexes actually include digital identities, cross-border payment, and data transfer and fintech. So those three infrastructures, I would say, must really be pushed forward, and that will really help to accelerate not only free movement of people, but also the freedom of establishment, because free movement of people without freedom of establishment will not really help us. So this is my last word. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shall we now go to Freedom, if you're still there? Shall we have a last word from you? Hello, Nana Kwame, Freedom Bediako. Shall we have a last word from you if you're still there?
Well, if it's not.
Well,
if it's not, let me come in.
Okay, then.
Let me come in. With Maya, I want you to look at this first. Section 27(1) of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center Act 2013. Okay, which was established years after the 1979 Protocol of ECOWAS. Do you know that if you're from Cote d'Ivoire or any part of West Africa, you can't actually own a barber shop in Ghana? Per the law. You can't operate a beauty salon. You cannot operate a barber shop. You cannot operate a taxi or car hire services with a fleet of fewer than 25 vehicles.
So it's the same thing the South Africans were complaining about.
Yeah, we are complaining about South Africans. Cheddar is on, but let me finish and then Cheddar can come in. Yeah, you can't operate a salon. And then you have a lot of Africans, when they even go to Europe, America, they operate in barbershops. Yep. But within the continent, in Ghana, if you are not from Ghana, you can't own a barbershop. And even employ Ghanaians, you can't own it. You can only own anything in Ghana if you are investing $1 million, or if you are employing more than 20 skilled workers in Ghana. For a barber shop, I don't know which skilled workers that you can have. So if I have a barber shop and I'm employing 20 Ghanaians, are they skilled labor? These are the laws that we have. And you hear Guta going on protests.
So point of correction, yes. Gabby. So I think the GIPC law was allowed, it allowed foreign investments of up to, if a minimum of $200,000. But now I think there is talk about, there can be talk about that. But I mean, we are talking about the minimum. You have to invest a certain amount. Okay, in certain areas, you need to employ over 20 skilled people. So thanks for the correction. But what it is that we are treating our fellow Africans differently and criminalizing what they do just to earn a living. And our own, we've signed these protocols, and it's very, very common with not just Ghana, across. And that's why I think when I hear Ghanaians going on about so-called Afrophobia or xenophobia from South Africa, I said, let's look within. Yeah. What are we doing? Pan-Africanism is supposed to have started, by and large, in our country. But we have laws
that sin against Pan-Africanism, sin against economic integration. And we don't seem to be aware of it. There are Ghanaians who are against Nigerians coming in, but if we're so afraid, Nigerians can come in today because they have free movement, but they are not doing it. Some are here. Some may say that they are, and it's even how our media treat foreigners. When a Ghanaian does some criminal act, it's not, they mention the person's name. But when the person who allegedly committed the crime happens to be Nigerian, they will say a Nigerian does that.
Thus,
why do we do so? Why
some
do
sort of collective punishment.
Absolutely. No, but we cannot stigmatize our own Africans if we really want to have an Africa that respects itself, an Africa of dignity, an Africa where we are working together, putting together our strengths. So I think I will allow Cheddar to come in. And then,
Nana Kwame,
yes, I prefer calling him Cheddar.
Nana Kwame Freedom Bediako. I love calling him Freedom.
Yes.
And it speaks to our theme today.
Absolutely.
Freedom, are you on, please?
Gabby.
Yes, sir.
Gabby.
My friend, and my
Cheddar wouldn't be for this platform.
Yes,
freedom
it's freedom.
Is much better.
Yes. Freedom.
We agree.
Yes.
We agree.
I agree.
All right,
I agree.
let's hear your parting message.
I mean, having free visa is just like having freedom, and it's very important. We have different types of freedom. The one important freedom is economic freedom, and I think that we don't get much of that. But hopefully, this sort of ideas that we're bringing together, trying to open our borders and bring the free visas and all of that could help us to sustain ourselves and move towards the economic freedom of this continent. It's rather unfortunate that the best of us are traveling outside because developments are much better over there. And it's one of the things that we need to look into, how to develop our continent and develop our countries so we can meet the needs of other countries. And that's the real connection. Talking about that, I would like to say that Moses said something about Rwanda having over 500 million of tourism, people who visited the country. One of the things that I wanted to say when you said that is that it's not just because people can have access or people can easily apply for visa or visa free to the country, but it's based on the development. Rwanda is one of the fastest growing countries in Africa in terms of development. They're not running behind schedule at all. In fact, just 1990 was 7 million, and within 30 years, they've doubled the population. So they must be doing something very good by using a template of Singaporeans' development, which is Enterprise Singapore, and also the Emiratis, using their strategy and their blueprint of development. I believe that most of African countries should start to use the Western blueprint, to go into, to help our development and to sustain the way we plan for our town planning development, our industrial development, social development, commercial development. I mean, it's not like we're copying them, but they have survived and succeeded with that. So maybe we can use similar blueprints to assist us build Africa properly the way we have to. I want to say that, I wish Africans the best and great success in all these ideas and decisions that we're taking. And I pray that God gives us that strength, like Gabby, you're saying, to bring us together, have, one mentality. Before we can have one currency, we should have one mentality. And that mentality will be stronger than our nationalities, which is way too much. If you look at it, there are a lot of, tribal issues all over Africa. So with that, I support the Borderless movement. I hope that, like Doctor was saying, water is everything, is life and everything. I hope that one day Africans are able to create their own borders, on the water bodies of Africa and connect to the coast, just like Europe have done, Americans have done, Asians have done. I wish the same for Africans. And thank you very much for this opportunity and this platform. I've enjoyed the webinar. I've enjoyed listening to Amin Idris, Ziad, Dr. Joy, yourself, Gabby, and my dear friend, Woody Meyer, and Moses, of course. Thank you all very much, and I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the, if you like, the young entrepreneurs of our continent, I don't know if you're in your 40s or 50s, you consider it as young, but that's an African way anyway. But I think we have Her Excellency Ambassador Ama Chimamua back on.
We do indeed.
Madam, you said borderless Africa is both necessary and achievable. Yet we are struggling to see it as a necessity, and our leaders struggle to ensure that it is achieved. Perhaps your parting words on how you think that it is achievable, because I think by and large we understand that it's necessary.
Her Excellency Ambassador Amachum, we are waiting for your answer. If you're still on, shall we hear you? And you may also activate your video because it's working now. Okay.
Is she definitely on?
I hear she's dropped off.
She's dropped off.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then I think what we do is since the final word will come from Her Excellency Madam Dlamini Zuma, we will pass on to Budimea to basically not just express your frustration, because we know that you go across the continent. You've spoken to me about certain levels of Afrophobia in certain parts of the continent. There are some places where it is black against black. Sometimes some that don't want to admit that they are black. And the other places, some prefer to be more Arab than African, and there are some areas that even you have fights over jollof. So, let's hear from you. I mean, how many African countries have you traveled so far?
39 different African countries.
39 out of the 55.
Yeah.
You've been to 39.
Yeah.
So I believe that you are experienced enough to tell us how it is to be an African visiting another African country.
And sometimes perceived as African in other African countries, or how they perceive themselves.
I think if I have to, dissect this particular topic, we won't end today, but it's really unfortunate and it's really sad to see some of the discriminations that you go through while traveling within Africa. I'll tell you some of my border posts. I can't remember the first time I arrived in Namibia. They wanted to check my bank account, how much I have in the account, before I'll be able to cross the border. So I was like, the money, I don't have cash, it's in the ATM. So what they did was that they took you to the ATM, put the card, check the figures that you have, that shows that you qualify to explore the country. You know, this is an African, but I was there seeing all the Europeans just trooping in. You know, it's sad that when you go to an African country where the African Union headquarters is, and then somebody will see you and then say, oh, you're an African, yeah, welcome to our country.
Yeah. This is Ethiopia you're talking about.
I'm telling you. And so it's just so sad. You know, I feel like the first thing that I feel like Africans are doing wrong with where the African Union headquarters is, each and every African going to the African, where I call the political capital of Africa, needs to apply for visa before you get there.
And you pay for it as well.
And you have to pay for it, which to me, it doesn't make sense. I mean, we were in Cape Verde. I can't remember, my camera guy had to travel to Cape Verde, and it was his first time going to jail at the airport. And don't forget that he traveled with the president of the country, because we're trying to, I think I even called you, we're trying to get him visa to go to Cape Verde. We applied for the visa over a month, we're not getting the visa. So they said, okay, the only way to go to the country is to travel with the president. I think the president was in Addis Ababa that time. This guy traveled with the president, get to the country. The immigration is like, we don't care, you came with the president, you have to go to prison. He was kept in prison. And listen, it's extremely sad, because some of these experiences that you have in Africa can make you even sad as an African traveling within Africa, because the first thing they see you as you don't qualify to travel in Africa as an African. I believe that if you open the mic, ask African travelers, they're gonna tell you exactly what I'm telling you. And I think it's unfortunate. And if we have to start addressing these issues, if you ask me, the African Union needs to be scrapped and start all over again, because I don't think
radical.
They qualify to lead this continent.
I think what you have to realize is that the African Union, it's what its heads of state and heads of government make it to be. We moved from OAU to the AU because we knew that the OAU was not fit for purpose. I believe that the AU is fit for purpose, but when it does well to get the African leaders themselves to adopt the protocols that will make us move, okay? Because the free movement protocol is there. The first phase of it is visa-free. So the AU got them to adopt it. What they have to do is go back to their countries and have them ratified. Is that the job of the AU? You have met as heads of states and government, and you have adopted these protocols and treaties that will move us into a common market zone. Yet when you get back to your countries, your respective countries, you then go to sleep.
Yeah, and I do think there is there are some good things coming out of the AU now with the visa free. I think we have about 5-6 countries now, little by little, you know.
Madam Zuma in 2016 issued the African passport when she was the chairperson of the AU Commission. What has happened to it since then?
I think within the year we've had Kenya, we've had Togo, and now Ghana, you know, coming on board. I think some action has started.
But I think the whole Agenda 2063 is what is derailing the continent. Because you can't have Agenda 2063. By the time you get to 2063, the people that form the Agenda 2063 won't be there.
It's actually quite forward-looking if you look at it. But we do not have enough time.
But I think what is important is that, you know, we started in 1963. Okay, when you look at Agenda 2063, it's not saying that wait till 2063 to gain a single market. There are processes, but it is visionary in a sense that 100 years after the OAU, when we get to 2063, where would we be? But the same Abuja Treaty of 1991 says that by 2028 we should have a single market. How close are we to it? So really, it is not the OAU or the AU, but our leaders, when they go back home, right, they don't see that as an imperative to get economic integration. I think by now we have to invite
the architect of
the architect of Agenda 2063, the very African who is the architect of the Africa we want, Agenda 2063. Madam, I think we will allow you to give us your closing remarks. And I think you've been provoked by Wadmaya.
I know.
So, Madam, please come in. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, I think Agenda 2063, maybe I'll use as a stupid example. It's like saying to your 5-year-old, I want you to go to school and I want you to be a doctor when you are this old. It doesn't mean that you won't do things that will eventually get that person to be a doctor. Because you have to put the steps. You can't just achieve everything overnight. We have to, if we hadn't said we must have the Africa Continental Free Trade as one of the flagships, we wouldn't be having it now. So 2063 is the destination, it's not the journey. The journey has started, but the destination is 2063. Because the Africa we want cannot be built overnight, but we have to build it. But I also want to just agree with Gabi, our chairperson, that the AU is a place where heads of state meet, the AU Commission brings the agenda, but the implementation has to be at member state level. I want to ask the young people and the citizens, do they hold their governments accountable for the decisions they've taken at the AU? Because you find that some of them will talk about the AU, but they don't even follow what their heads of state have agreed. And therefore, the heads of state need to make sure that it's implemented. But the citizens also need to hold the government accountable. And some of the things the citizens can do themselves. So everyone has to participate in building the agenda, the Africa we want. But let me come back to the topic that we've been discussing for the last more than 2 hours of the Borderless Africa. Again, if all of us as citizens were holding our governments accountable, we would be saying to them, rectify the protocol on free movement. And let me say what the core pillars of this protocol are. There are 3 core pillars. One is the right of entry, which we have been talking about. 2 is the right of residence. 3 is the right of establishment, the ability for individuals and business people to pursue economic activities and establish themselves within another country. So it covers all the things that we've been talking about. The things that Amina has been talking about are there in that protocol. So the AU has succeeded, they signed the protocol, but now it's at implementation level, which is at member state level. And as citizens, we should be holding them, governments accountable to make sure they rectify, and therefore these things can happen. They've already agreed on them because they are in the protocol that they've signed. So I think our biggest victory would be if we can get 15 countries to rectify this protocol, because it will then come into effect. Only 4 have. Let's all try and get our
Madam,
persuade as many heads of state to.
Madam, you are absolutely right. And I think that's the whole point about the Make Africa Borderless campaign. Let, first of all, the citizens understand that their leaders have signed up to these treaties and protocols. The treaties and protocols that would not allow Wodemaya's cameraman to be arrested and imprisoned in Cape Verde. All these things are in our laws, but let the citizens own it and let the citizens hold their leaders responsible. The job that they do at the AU Commission, we appreciate it, but we should put pressure. Let this economic integration be owned and driven by the African people themselves, particularly the young people who know that their destiny is better manifest if we have economic integration and prosperity. Perhaps, Wodemaya, I want to say...
I just want to say the fact that you all are saying that the young people needs to hold the leaders accountable of what they discuss at the AU. I don't agree with that, because
it's not what they discuss at the AU. The thing is, what we are saying is that, look, our leaders, we hold them responsible. We go on, the Gen Zs, they go on social media to talk about this, that, but they are not looking at the whole Pan-African agenda, which will make sure that our economy can industrialize, it can attract the investment that is required, and provide the jobs and opportunities.
I don't think the leaders are involving young people when it comes to.
So you and I should do that.
I wish we could have a debate.
We should do that.
Wodemaya, we are not involved. We are not involved.
Wodemaya, you are very powerful. You are very powerful because of your social media outreach, and you are leading. Be more active in educating them. So when you post and then they come out to tell you that no, they don't want Nigerians in their country. Please take them on.
So I entreat you to read the manifesto, the Make Africa Borderless Now manifesto. We've got everything in there. And you can drive this Make Africa Borderless Now campaign. You know, it's about harmonizing our policies to make it happen. And so let's make it happen. So thank you very much.
You have copies? You have copies?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us on this webinar, our second in the series of the Make Africa Borderless Now campaign. We have been talking about advancing an integrated and visa-free Africa to move, connect and trade freely, overcoming Afrophobia. Our discussion was split into two parts. The first session dealt with advancing free movement, the right of settlement, and Africa's integration agenda while addressing Afrophobia. The second discussed visa-free as a bridgehead in accelerating African movement. And we had the pleasure of having Asase Broadcasting Company supporting us as our media partner. We also had as media partners Channel 1 TV, CTFM, and Max 24 TV. We would like to thank our highly distinguished panelists today for joining us with their incredible insights. We would like to thank Her Excellency Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Africa Prosperity Network's Advisory Council Chair, former Chair of the AU Commission, and a long-standing minister in the South African government. We would like to thank Her Excellency Ambassador Ama Chum Amwa, African Union Commissioner for Health, Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development. We would like to thank Gabi Asari Oshridako Esquire, Executive Chairman of the Africa Prosperity Network and co-founder of Africa Legal Associates Ghana and Africa Legal Practice International. Would like to thank Dr. Joy Kategekwa, Director of the African Development Bank's Regional Integration Coordination Office. Would like to thank Ziad Hamwi, co-founder and national president of the Borderless Alliance and executive director of Tarzan Limited. Nana Kwame Freedom Bediako, real estate developer, industrialist and politician. He is chairman of Qualis Group. Emmanuel Kwesi Tabaro, energy policy researcher and international development professional. Amin Idris Adum, Director of Economy, Infrastructure, Industrialization, Trade and Regional Integration at Auda Nepad. Dr. Josephine Ochre Dako, medical doctor, public health specialist and program head at WITS Reproductive Health and HIV Institute in South Africa. Wodemaya, a proudly African and global African travel vlogger with one of the top travelogues on YouTube. And finally, Dr. Ahmed Zenya Bugre, Senior Advisor on Free Movement to Her Excellency Ambassador Amachum Amwa, AU Commissioner for Health, Humanitarian and Social Development. Would also like to thank Fritz Lekunze, a top Cameroonian health researcher who lives in South Africa, who brought us a wonderful clip of his. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and we hope you all go to the Africa Prosperity Network .com to sign the petition on Borderless Africa, because this is going to bring us the prosperity that we're all fighting for. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again. Sign the petition on the Africa Prosperity Network.